I am so stupid because I set the desktop audio wrong, so it hadn't been recording the audio. So I just want to reintroduce.
All right.
We started, but
Yeah,
God, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. But
it will.
just to reiterate, you're Tarot Reader Frog. You run the VR Mystery School with about 30 to 40 active members and about 500 people in the Discord who kind of uh, just circle around and see what's happening, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And just to reiterate again, like what kind of events do you do there? What kind of guest
Right.
speakers do you have?
Well, most of these things, it's kind of experimental. So to find people who are interested in, sharing their expertise in VR setting is kind of tricky. But thankfully, as things are rolling on with the project, more and more people are showing up to do this. So yeah, recently we had the first guest we had was a very traditional topic, Western esoteric tradition, by somebody who had been a practitioner from this for a long time. We recently had another interesting guest speaker who's actually working on the Game Arcane project. I highly recommend people check this out because it really dives into, the overlap between esotericism and video games
What
or
is
games in
that?
general.
The Arcane project, is that the
It's
um
Game Arcane by XT0, I think it is.
okay.
You can just look it up on Reddit, on YouTube. We have his 2 hour lecture at the VR Mystery School up on our YouTube as well for anybody that's interested. So yeah, anybody that has expertise on any kind of subject to do with personal development, mysticism, or anything edgy, to do with VR and the technology we're dealing with is really welcome. But since it's so new, it's kind of uh, not always as easy to find people who are willing to enable.
How does mysticism directly relate to personal development? Like how do those two things coincide
Yeah,
with
it's a
each
good
other?
question, right? Um, so I looked up a couple definitions for mysticism because it's it's kind of a question you could dedicate a whole podcast to, or maybe even 10. The definition of mysticism has changed over the course of history and so on. So again, if you're looking into like the European or the Western esoteric tradition, the magical tradition, with alchemy and magical circles and so on, it's actually kind of a strange definition, seeking unity with the divine, but also with the like kind of philosophical understanding that the oh, excuse me, some vehicle coming by, the unity with the divine, the divine is also everything that is. So it also means me unifying with you, or me unifying with my fears, maybe overcoming them and so on, right? So it's kind of seems like a strange statement to make, unifying with the divine or with God. But if you pick that apart, what does it really mean in practice? Then yeah, it becomes quite interesting.
What
And
does the divine in relation to mysticism, like what's the difference between that and what you would see in like Christianity?
yeah, that really depends, right? So I'd say that pretty much every cultural tradition or religious tradition has at some level like a core teaching which has to do with mysticism. So if we're all worried about becoming more developed as people or more in touch with each other and so on, there's different ways to go about it. And mysticism, it's one of the tools in the arsenal for bringing about these personal changes, and it has everything to do with a kind of experience of things. So it's not so much talking about it, because sometimes even what you experience in a mystical experience, it cannot be expressed in words. But beyond that, also, it's really about putting things in practice. So engaging with other people is something everybody does every day. But if you become mindful of this in a certain way, it might become a mystical experience. Understanding that there's something beautiful there, there's something worth being cultivated, and so on. Yeah. So in short, mysticism has everything to do with the practical aspect, in my opinion, of the philosophy. You can read about it, but mysticism is the experience, I'd say. And of
Okay.
course, there's
So
much more nuance to it.
I'm gonna ask kind of the elephant in the room, which is what you run a cult?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's absolutely not. I don't even think of myself as a teacher, and I get asked this question a lot too. It's really, you know, times are changing. There's not really any teachers around anymore. And my perspective, often when this gets introduced, there's issues like might somebody abuse their position of power and so on. And let's be honest, these things have become niche in today's society, and not everybody is into it anymore. So how are you going to find a quality teacher? It's very hard for a lot of people. So what I benefited most from in my personal journey through all these subjects was being able to converse with others about stuff. Not necessarily like a top-down structure where this person says something and that's how it's going to be. But the more people join the conversation and share their bit of experience or insight, the more meaningful it becomes. And I think that's really the emphasis of VR Mystery School too. Like, sure, we have guest speakers and so on, but they're just inquisitive people, on their own, just like everybody else
Just
who is listening in
teachers,
the audience.
right?
Not necessarily, just enthusiastic people. Try to avoid using the word teacher as much as possible because there's all these weird connotations around that. So
Like
yeah, it's
what?
really about let's share in the group and see where we get. That's kind of the idea. No cult thing, no one word that is more important than the other. If you look at the library, there's 35 categories, representing most of psychology of different cultures. And the idea I like to cultivate is that there's no one correct answer to all these things, and that you can really get the most out of it by getting more perspectives and gathering them.
But why not use the word teacher? Because I feel like that's a pretty lax word to use. Someone who teaches, who can teach a skill, or
Yeah, it's a good point. Maybe we should use that word. But in my experience, when I look around Discord groups or other communities I've been a part of, it seems to give wrong impressions or bring introduce a kind of stress, like the teacher knows best or something like that. When I don't believe that's always the case.
okay. How many people do you? Well, how many lectures do you have? Is it like a weekly thing?
Yeah, we're trying to fit in as much as possible, of course. And again, it's limited by what people can spare in terms of time and effort. But yeah, right now, we're trying to maintain at least a weekly event for reading. And whenever possible, by reading, I mean, classics, essential works from whatever tradition. And yeah, trying to get as much people on board for giving more subjects in the future. So somebody is now working on yeah, like I guess you could call it a course on Buddhism, for example. Some other folks are working on a weekly um, meditation activity that's also going to take place. So yeah, things are growing a bit, but there's no real pattern to it yet. It's just take what you can.
Yeah, you said like essential works. What counts as an essential work? Like what would be the crash
Yeah.
course in mysticism if someone wanted to get into it? Like someone who's a total skeptic.
Yeah, well, the good answer or the simple answer to that is look in the VR Mystery School library, right? Which might be interesting to mention. The VR chat world has a library with about 35 plus categories now, and you can click a book in there and read the synopsis to see if it's any good. But the criteria for the books there are that they are either critically acclaimed within their field or tradition, and that they're also hopefully a little bit beginner friendly. So if it's either of the two, then they're a good candidate for in there. So yeah, this is. I could give you a list of books. You could also dive in there and approach this question or subject from whatever angle you like to. But if I had to pick one book, right, it would probably be Tree of Life by Israel Regardie, which is quite old already, but a very interesting work because um, it looks at the mechanics of mysticism and magic as they have been practiced in the real world, not in a pop culture cartoon kind of style. know the real meat of it, and sees what's going on here. What are the steps? What are uh,
I
yeah,
think
the
Dreams is
elements that
pulling
make
up
it?
the book here. You can see.
Cool.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's a good
Is it
version
this one?
too. The orange one is like a modern republication of it with some editing done by the Ciceros, who are also very interesting authors in this field. Highly recommend it. It gives you a good insight about the real mechanics, what makes a magical ritual work, according to the theory at least.
How
You-
old is this book? Do you know off the
Uh,
top of your head, or at least just like a
I,
ballpark number?
I think it's 100 years old,
Okay.
something like that.
Who were those two dudes on the cover?
That's one dude actually. That's Thoth,
That's what I
the
thought.
Egyptian god of wisdom and all that, and magic.
Huh. How do Egyptians play into this? Like how far back does their mysticism history reach?
Oh, way back probably. I'd say mysticism is probably as old, and spirituality for that matter is probably as old as human consciousness is. So
Yeah,
I guess what you're asking too maybe is the influence. Why do we always see Egyptian symbolism when it's about magic? It's because I guess in our history, especially in the West, people have just been super inspired by this supposedly ultra ancient, wise people with their monoliths and their crazy buildings and so on. So a lot of it has been used, abused, repurposed, inspired. A lot of work that came after it, and that's why it's still around today, even in the cover of this book.
are there any aspects of like I know that you have in religion like Jesus walking on water and things like that, but are there any aspects of magic or mysticism that people don't really think about to be magic? It was just kind of ingrained into our culture, and
Yeah, I think there's like one of the first things people will talk about when they get into these subjects is the extreme day and night difference between what we learn magic to be through pop culture, for example, and stories, and what magic is in the sense that Israel Regardi talks about in his book, for example, right? So they're very far apart actually. And so, yeah, again, the answer to your question could be a podcast on its own. But if there's anything like an example you want me to give, or
well, just any aspect where it's because I don't really think about magic too often. I just know that like Jesus walked on water and there were
right,
talking snakes and that sort of thing, which is I feel like a very basic form of magic. I mean the turning uh, water into wine, that type of thing. But
right.
aside from that, I don't know of any culture where magic is present and people don't really think about it being magic. I just didn't know if you knew.
Yeah, I think again this applies to most religious worldviews or spiritual worldviews. The idea that reality creation is not just something that happens to you, but that is something that you might participate in either through prayer, soliciting things, maybe learning so-called divine virtues, and how to behave according to them. And I think again, every culture has some kind of notion of these things you should do and should not do, which strictly speaking, it might not seem very magical, but according to the mystic, this is very magical indeed.
So what
Every word a prayer, and so on. Those kind of thoughts.
what types of mysticism are there globally? Like what different types of magic are there? Are there like some fundamental areas like how we define like Western and Eastern religion, or is it very down to the culture of magic?
Yeah, I would say again, there's this interesting, I guess, way of thinking about this. You could call it, I guess, it's syncretism, right? So it's looking at different cultures and while respectfully acknowledging the differences between them, but also looking at the commonalities between them, right? So yeah, if you spend some time reading different sorts of texts, you will see that again, different cultures will have, well, again, their differences, but they're also very much talking about the same thing. For example, in the West, there are forms of divination, self-reflection or reflecting on the future, what may happen. And in the East, there are as well. In the West, we deal with spirits, whatever that may mean. In the East, just as well, and in other parts of the world, right? So, yeah, I think there is magic. If you really want to break it down to two essentials, the one has to do with influencing the macrocosm, right, the external reality, or interacting with it, and the other has to do with the microcosm. Everything that constitutes you, your experience of things, your motivations, your abilities, and so on. So it's
Okay,
very
what is
interesting.
macrocosm and microcosm? Like, how
Right.
can you kind of define those?
Yeah, so I was trying to already, but it's the macrocosm, everything big, everything. Sorry, the macrocosm, yeah, everything big, everything out there, everything outside you. Everything that is not your person, your psyche, your soul, your body, whatever you want to call it. The microcosm, it's the smaller version of that. It is you. It is. Everything that constitutes you, both in the physical and the less physical sense. And the idea is also, by calling them both the cosms, that they mirror each other in some kind of way. And this is also an idea that you will see in many different traditions, that the out there and the in there will mirror or be alike in some way. As above, so below. You might have heard that one before.
So the macrocosm is like the collective spirit of
Yeah.
everything else, and then the micro is just the your spirit.
Spirit, but not just that, even the physical aspects of it. So it's really just, when you're talking about the microcosm, you're talking about the self or the individual. And like you said, when you're talking about the macro, it's the collective. It's everything out there, including other people's microcosms, maybe.
So
Sorry
how
to
does
interrupt, guys.
oh
I don't think our stream's running on YouTube right now.
oh for real?
Yeah, I've got a message from Nilly and one of the people in the chat. Or
Okay. Well, we're still recording, so if nothing else, I can always just upload this. But
You can
True.
cut out some of my rambling too that way. That's great.
oh, it's all good. We may
Rambling's
just.
what makes it good, man.
It says it's a. Oh, there's a dude. Okay. All right, let me do this. Okay. Sorry to those who were waiting. Apparently there's a second layer. You can't just press go live on Streamlabs. You have to do that on YouTube too. We have recorded this though, so everything up until this point has been recorded, and I'll just upload this later. But we were just talking about microcosms and macrocosms. And my question after that was, how does this all relate to just kind of the human body in of itself? Because you look at like monks and those people who can do insane things with their bodies. That's like it almost seems otherworldly, but it's also all within the realm of physical possibility. So how does magic kind of differentiate itself from just like self-improvement? Just tuning your body to be one thing, like one skill.
Yeah, I think it's again, very interesting question, and I think the lines are very blurry, right? Because what is important is the context. For some person, personal development might just be something they don't even think about. For another person, this might be spiritual journey. So I think it really depends on the person that is doing it, or the practitioner, so to speak.
Okay.
Makes any sense. But to get back to your other question, how this relates to, I can give my own personal example. How I got into this at all was that I was just constantly running into my own shortcomings to the point where it was driving me crazy, right? I had to go through some kind of a very tough moment, which then led to a realization like, hey, there's more here. There's more to get out of life, or there's a way to look at this misery where it becomes less suffering and more of a learning experience, and that was like a switch went, from off to on, and it's like nothing. I'm still struggling with stuff, of course. I'm only human, but after this, every time now that I've seen this in that context, when a tough time comes along, I try to look at it, in the sense of, well, there's a chance here, and maybe I should do something useful with this kind of stress moment, right? And you see that the only thing that changed here really was my perception of what was happening. So yeah, it's a really important moment. And well, when I figured that out, I started reading more, going beyond my, oh, I know everything better because I'm a young person and so on. And I just found all these wonderful writings and teachings that are like things that, well, somebody who grew up non-religious as me, I consider them to be tools to rewrite my own consciousness, like get rid of bad habits, bad acting habits or behavior. I mean, bad thinking habits, and not just that, also replace with very interesting new habits or new thinking habits. So somewhere along the way, this did become spiritual for me, whereas previously it was more like, hey, there's a way out of trouble. So again, I couldn't tell you where exactly it was, quote unquote, non-spiritual self-development and where it turned into a kind of a spiritual thing. But maybe that's because I just realized so many people have been talking about issues and similar subjects, to do with opening up to the world or not being hindered by your so-called traumas or past or whatever. People were writing about this 2,000 years ago, and when I was reading about it like 10 years ago, it was still just as relevant and just as meaningful and transformative to read and practice, right? So yeah, it's a very tough question. I wouldn't be able to say where does the one start and the other end, but they go hand in hand very well.
So
Like your ego death moment?
Sorry?
Would you consider that like an ego death moment?
I think it's a term I haven't still completely figured out. I hear it a lot, but I found it hard to say what exactly an ego death is. But I think I could use that term, yeah, because what is ego? It's like the things you cling on to, right? Your little castle you built around yourself, and so on. And that castle really came down, and it was like less of me and more of the world, right? So
Right.
I guess you could use that term for sure.
Do you think that's like a maybe not necessarily enlightenment, but kind of like a level of enlightenment?
Yeah, well, again, a tough question. These terms are hard to use if you don't define them beforehand, because again, they're evolving, they're used in many traditions. But if I, just look at it, it probably was some kind of an awakening moment. But the work only started then. It didn't end, by any means. It started and it's still going on, and it will probably go on for a long time. So it wasn't the ultimate awakening or the enlightenment that people sometimes talk about.
Yeah.
does magic more relate to self-improvement, or is it more about the magic aspect of it, the mystic part? Like
Well,
where does it
I
fall
like
between
to
that?
maybe teach people. Well, not teach. I try to tell people that it's probably best if you approach this stuff from a perspective of making meaningful change in the world. For example, like altruism, developing altruism. But I also know many people who say you don't need this at all. It's just as a mechanical thing you could apply to even get things. And it does kind of work. You don't need to be super spiritual necessarily to follow the instructions. You just need to develop certain skills to a degree.
What kind of
So
skills?
yeah. Well, you're going then into like the core stuff, right, of what makes it work, which is also more eloquently described in Tree of Life and other works. But there's certain elements, right? So you need to bridge the gap, for example, between the higher consciousness and the lower consciousness. Or you might need to develop stuff like visualization techniques, so that you can use your mind's eye almost like a VR set to push yourself certain directions, and bring yourself into certain states. Somebody who hasn't done extensive practice with this kind of visualization techniques isn't going to pull it off the first time unless they're especially talented. But at the same time, it is something that everybody can learn. That's very fun about this too. It's not something you need to be gifted with at birth or chosen by the gods. It follows, or supposedly follows, the rules of nature, just as anything else does. So that means that you can learn it, Two Stroke can learn it, I can learn it, LSD can learn it, and do it. Just takes time, and you have to be crazy enough to put in the time, to see, okay, here's something for me, something I want to pursue, and it's not for everybody, but if it is for you, then it could be super interesting.
As far as VR learning goes for this kind of stuff, how does it differentiate from real learning? Is there any like difference between that? Like you have I don't know how you would put this, examples of how the magic would work in practice in VR versus, not being able to see your results in real life. Are there any kind of teaching tools that you have at that school that are different from real life
Well, there are
aspects?
mostly they're a bit to do with understanding the philosophy. For example, there's tarot decks with information included. For each of the 2 decks we have, there is a companion book, and the information displays show the information from those companion books. So that's more like a learning thing, right? Less to do with actual experience. Then there is the Qing set, for example. It's Chinese divination. It's again, kind of a mental exercise or something like that. So I do believe that you can absolutely apply VR for training, for example, visualization and so on. But we haven't really applied this yet. And also, I should also say that the reason for VR Mystery School to exist is not so people can become VR magicians, but so they can become real actualized people in real life, right? Using whatever they might have found in this VR space. But yeah, there's immense possibilities for combining mysticism, magic, and VR. Many people have been developing this even before VR was a thing, just using PC. And many people are doing it now too. So
Can you kind of
but there's
explain tarot decks to me? I've only ever had one tarot reading before, and it was
right.
by, and I shit you not, Two Stroke, it was by this like schizophrenic guy who had gotten an Oculus Quest, and
Oh
he
no.
told me that he would give me a reading, and he did. He did it over the phone and like showed me everything. I didn't really understand it at the time, but then this guy goes on to sell his VR headset because he lost his like housing situation. He sold his VR headset to get a skateboard, and then now he like skateboards around to different casinos and card counts in blackjack to win money, and then invests that money into Bitcoin. So he was doing this like a year ago, so he may be doing better now that Bitcoin
Holy
like
shit.
rose up super
I
fast.
think he knows something we
It's
don't.
crazy.
I know. I'm like, that's the life to live. I need to check up on that guy. But seriously, like that's the only experience I've ever had with magic. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm maybe a little bit skeptical.
Was his reading accurate?
I don't remember if it was it seemed semi accurate at the time, but that's the thing is tarot readings seem like something kind of like fortune cookies where they can kind of blanket over some things until they kind of fall into the grooves and people are like, oh yeah, that lines up with me. So I don't know if you kind of have like a deeper explanation for how those things work and how they would function, but to me, the only experience I've had was like okay, this maybe fits, but I wasn't
Right.
like absolutely blown away. So can you kind of like explain tarot decks?
Mm, I guess I could try. I always say when I help people, for example, using the thing in the VR chat world, that there are two ways about it. It could be that you are just using your mind to make sense of some data, kind of random data, and using your pattern seeking mind to relate this to whatever is currently going through you, stuff you're dealing with. Other people, they go completely the other way. They say, well, you're tapping into God's creation with this, for example, and literally drawing, like echoes out of that, and seeing them in the cards or whatever. I'm not sure. I don't have the answers to this. I don't think I ever will. But it seems like when you just follow the steps, when you use the deck, when you look up the definitions for the cards, that for some wicked reason, a lot of people seem to say that the readings are pretty accurate. And you mentioned the fortune cookie thing. I definitely think it's possible to give this, do they call it cold reading, or where you're just saying ambiguous stuff and so on. But as you take the cards more literally, when you really dive into the sources of correspondences and the meanings of them, you will find out that each card has a very particular character or symbol to it, or meaning to it. That it's not really something that always applies to everything. There's a card about literal physical altercation, or something like being shunned by a particular person from your close circle, for example. These are very specific things. So I'm not sure why people think it works, but it seems to be very meaningful. I'm a bit of a pragmatist. I don't do much metaphysical speculation. I just look at what works and doesn't work, and,
Yeah.
and then I focus on that.
Do you think that it's okay, if we draw back the fortune cookie comparison about it just kind of applying to people and they draw their own meaning from it, do you think that even that is like a good thing, to where people can get their tarot reading and see something about themselves and kind of have an awakening, and it may be, BS, and someone just laid out a bunch of cards for them, but they derived their own meaning, and that's what matters, is the fact that they were able to see something?
Well, there's people who argue this, but I'm not sure. Are you saying that in this case people would use the books and the references, or would they just completely wing it and going off the pictures and going off their gut feeling, for
Well,
example?
I'm more saying the sense that people derive their own meanings from the cards that are played out, and regardless of if it was a quote unquote good or bad reading, like they were able to find something for themselves, and that's what
Yeah,
mattered. Is that
I
kind of
think that
the important aspect of tarot readings?
absolutely it is definitely meant to get you moving along, right? So it's a tool of reflection for um, dealing with stuff, whether they're thoughts, life issues. And because of this character of each card, it will definitely force you sometimes to look outside of the little perspective tunnel you've been stuck in for a while, right? And yeah, I think again, anybody can ruin anything, including a tarot reading. They could see doom and gloom in it and maybe be scared by it, but I think it's much more useful, yeah, if, like you say, you can use it, give whatever insights you may get a proper place, and then move on. If occultism, magic, those kind of things start weighing on you to the point where you can no longer normally function, you should probably not do it. Right? And this goes for anything anyway, but yeah, it does sadly happen quite a lot with tarot. I've had people who are completely scared after getting certain cards. Well, that's not supposed to happen.
Do you think that that's more of a personal thing than with the cards themselves? Like it's just, do you think that people who are maybe kind of outcasts, or seen as odd, are more likely to pick up magic as to kind of self heal?
In some way, yes, but at the same time, I've also seen a lot of people, dig the hole deeper for themselves that way. It's not necessarily guaranteed that it is for everybody because with all this weirdness going on, at the end of the day, you still have to get back your feet on the ground, right? That's definitely not for everybody. So it's why it's no secret. It's often written about too that it's kind of a narrow road, or not something a lot of people will be able to pull off effectively. But this is about very very the quote unquote deep occult stuff. This doesn't really apply to something as simple and elegant as like Buddhist mindfulness of breathing meditation, right? This is something anybody could do and benefit from, and it's totally mystical.
That falls under magic? Like Buddhism falls under magic?
Yeah,
I think
it's
most
kind
religious
of
practices do, don't they?
it's kind
Like
of
even
I don't think the definitions of the words are as important as the practices themselves, but you can already see how ambiguous these lines are between these concepts and these practices, and what's really going on. Is what a Christian does on Sunday at the church with his fellow Christians, is that magic? What about the pilgrimage of the Muslims? Is that magic? With the
So
right
how would
context
you
and
define magic?
perspective, I could say it is. Well, again, such a complex thing. But for me, I would be inclined to agree with this general modern definition, which is like creating change in accordance with will. So you have an idea, and you're going to do everything in your power to do that, including mundane stuff, but also, any other possible way to do that.
So
Bring it on.
even just like mental control falls under magic on that definition. Like the idea that, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym today, and then I tell myself that I'm gonna go to the gym today, and I do it. So it's under
There you
will.
go.
Is that does that fall
I
under
would
magic?
say traditionally yes, but our view of the human psyche, and psychology and all these things is actually not as old as these ideas about mysticism and so on. So maybe for a long time this could have been seen as working on a part of God within yourself and letting that come out more, or something along those lines. It's completely alien language to what people might be dealing with today, but here you see again the context and the mind of the person who's doing this stuff is so important to whether it's just some people again might be going to the gym but for vain reasons. They might be doing it to work on themselves and then better be able to live life and do so good stuff, but they might be spending the whole day afterward in the mirror and saying, oh man, I'm so beautiful, everybody should love me. That's it's also possible. Again, it's the context and the purpose and the intent. I think that's also very important to what's happening here.
Huh. How do drugs play into like magic and wizardry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think again, I'm not an expert on this, but since humans have found ways to influence their consciousness with substances, it's been around, and it's also been accredited with divine qualities, I believe. Mushroom cults in South America, where DMT and so on is traditionally used. It's not just for fun, it's always revered something where it's to be respected because there's something to learn, and so on, right? I think it's kind of universal, but at the same time, not completely universal, right? Like in European medieval magic, grimoire magic and things like that. There isn't really much use of drugs at all, and it's quite interesting to understand.
Have you ever heard talk of Satanists using drugs like crystal meth to lower their wavelength to a lower vibration so that they can allow demonic spirits to enter them? Because I've heard of this a few times from people.
I haven't heard of it, but I wouldn't be surprised, if people follow that line of thinking. again, this is a kind of metaphysical speculation of the kind that I don't usually venture into. But it is often said by people that, using certain kind of drugs, again, in a wrong state of mind, and, meth is very bad stuff, whichever way you use it, that it supposedly opens you up to undesired influences. But again, I wouldn't know.
Can you
I
pull
can
something
only
up on
tell
that?
you.
I wanna see that.
Probably not gonna find anything about it. It's just I've heard from like people that were ex-Satanists that came out of it. They said that crystal meth was like a huge part of their regimen because it lowered them down their wavelength so that they could actually
That
let
sounds
demonic
ill-advised, to
spirits
be honest.
come into them.
About letting demons in. That's kind of
Yeah,
sketch.
Do you
it's
believe
also
in?
not really what we deal with
No,
VR
I know.
mystery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not involved in that. I never said. I never thought you were a Satanist, but I was just
All
thinking,
right.
what's your opinion on?
Do you believe in wavelengths? Because okay, that's kind of the one magic semi aspect. It also seems pretty grounded in reality when someone says that they're like on the same wavelength as someone else, where I think there are like a couple different types of flow states, right? Like you have like one-sided, two-sided, and no flow state at all, whereas like a one-sided is someone who kind of lines up and is able to listen to what you're talking about, and they can go on and you can feel comfortable admitting things to them, and you know that they're kind of in the same thinking pattern as you, whereas like a two-sided flow state is both of you are able to just kind of it's like a where you can both just shut up for a minute and it doesn't really matter, it doesn't feel awkward because you both know that you're thinking the same kind of thing. And then like a no flow state at all would just be no kind of connection, there's no lineup. That's kind of the one you say like metaphysical aspect that I kind of believe in. Is that something that's covered in your school, or at least something that you think about?
Well, I do believe that what is all of it worth if at the end of the day you're not like a more communicative person, right? There's no use in gathering all the wisdom in the world if it doesn't allow you to interact with others in a more meaningful way. So that's definitely one of the things I want to throw out there already. But yeah, the wavelength stuff. I mean, there's so many models to use and talk about these things with, right? If the model is adequate for the kind of conversation you're having and the inquiry you're making, then sure, why not? But to say, do I believe in frequencies or something like that? I'm not sure how to answer that, but I can totally see that, being in the same vibe with somebody else, vibing, vibing together, whatever, I can totally understand that language, and it's something you can experience maybe more readily than you can talk about it. So that's totally a thing, and yeah, I believe that in many different traditions, also, the more occulty ones. There's always an emphasis on how do you interact with people. Again, whether it's the Satanists who say that you can use other people to your gain in some way, not all Satanists will say that, this, of course, but if it's not that, then then it's something like, okay, there's a part in you where if you develop that, you are able to more effortlessly vibe with people, and not necessarily only if they're on your wavelength, right? Allows you to be more open, more emphatic, more dynamic, and communicating with others, maybe in their language or something like that. It's a skill that I would love to develop more, especially since VR Mystery School is like weird stuff for most people, and I'm not the great or the best public speaker to explain about it always, right? So yeah, it's super important thing to develop, especially in today's age, where this meme is kind of true. There's so much communication technology, but there's so little actual communication going on. That's something we can all work on for sure.
Now, Dreams, I want you to pull this up. I know there's like a study that shows that like cat purring is like healing, like they have healing properties because of the vibrations.
Right.
Similar
That's
to how like
scientific fact.
yeah, I just
They
wanted
don't
to.
get cancer in their body, only in their toes and in their tails and their ears.
How
Wait,
cool is that?
what?
Yeah,
Is that for
Wait.
real?
cats don't get cancer in their body, only in their toes. Only places where their purring can't reverberate to heal.
Nah, that's crazy.
It's really a thing. That's crazy. Yeah, I heard about the cat laying on, but that's really crazy. I'll tell you another crazy thing. You might have heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
breathing techniques. I mean, you might know this already. A lot of people listening might do already, but this was clinically proven too. It's tried and tested. He was injected with, I think it was Ebola or some very nasty disease. And he was able to fight it off by doing breath exercises. And not only that, he got a couple of people that he taught the same method, who were not necessarily experts on anything to do with this beforehand. And he got them to repeat the same results just by following the mechanical steps. Do A, then do B, then do C, and now your body is fighting off Ebola or something very nasty. Some things like everyday breathing. There's secrets to be unveiled there that can make a very meaningful impact on not just your physical health. And how cool is it that you can explore these things? All the magic aside and so on. How
Yeah,
cool is this stuff, right?
it says lower blood pressure by interacting with the cat and hearing the purring sound, reducing the risk of heart disease. Cat owners have a 40% less risk of having a heart attack. Purr vibrations help heal infections, swelling, bone healing, and growth. Pain relief, muscle growth and repair, tendon repair, and joint mobility. So yeah.
It's kind
That's
of
pretty
it's
crazy.
kind of funny that cats heal in that aspect, but then in the other aspect, the only reason that we like cats is because of toxoplasmosis in our brain.
Yeah. Well, cats don't always purr because they're happy. They will purr when they're injured because it helps the healing process.
Oh,
Like
for real?
I had a cat that had a disease called FIP, and it's basically fatal. Like there's nothing you can do to cure it, but it's called the purring disease because the cat will sit and purr 24/7 until
Wow.
it dies.
Wow, that's crazy.
Do you think Mongolian throat singing is our purring?
Probably.
Dude.
You're onto something for sure.
No, think about it. When monks sit
Yeah.
there and chant Om all day in a low vibration, that's the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Very
it
well could be,
is.
honestly. Yeah, that's something to pursue. Is there any healing qualities attributed to that stuff? I wouldn't know, but it's worth a Google at least for sure.
If I can share one of my personal experiences, I got into Mongolian throat singing for like a solid 2 months, and I would do it myself in the car, and I tried to emulate everything they were doing. And I guess you could say a few months afterwards, I had what was called, I guess what you would call a spiritual awakening. So I think that could be onto something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, so this is also interesting, right? If you're going to compare all these books, why is it that so many traditions are doing something like this, intoning of whether it's God names or mantras or, other stuff? There's something similar between them, and they're not exactly the same, but, is there something to be found here? Those are some interesting questions, for sure.
I wonder if the singing bowls have the same properties as like.
Well, yeah, that's why everybody kind of uses them, right? I mean, you sit there and listen to the bowls, and they kind of heal your spirit, I guess they say.
Yeah. That's kind of because, with the whole like wavelength things, that's the part that I genuinely believe is the
Right.
just
Yeah,
that
there could be
aspect.
something physiological going on there, right?
Yeah.
With, I don't know, the way the body works and so on.
Well,
Yeah,
everything
it's
is a
worth some
vibration.
research for sure.
So if your wavelength, everything is a wavelength, so a reverberation of a wave, right? Like the whole quantum experiment we were watching, how literal physical matter can become waves depending on how it is in the universe and how it's being
Yeah.
interacted with. So yeah, anything can be on that wavelength. It's like a radio. So you tune to the right station, right?
Speaking of that, speaking of the slit experiment, I'm gonna ask this in every podcast now. Do you think we're in a simulation? Do you think it's possible?
I think it's absolutely possible. even if you just look at one of these central texts from the Western esoteric tradition, the Hermetic philosophy and the Corpus Hermeticum, it suggests something like God is something akin to mind, and it's creating inwards. It's like dreaming everything into creation. That kind of sounds like a computer running a program in some way, right? It's like I'm pretty sure back then people didn't have a notion of like is the world a simulation in the same sense we do now with our computer technology, but or the Buddhists with the idea of Mara, right? The great illusion, and so on. Yeah, there's so many traditions who are kind of saying, it might very well be. But again, I do recognize that there's some things that are, more readily understood than others. Wonder if we'll be ever able to figure out completely, if it is a simulation or not. But no, it's definitely among the possibilities. There's more likely things and less likely things. This is among the more likely ones, I would say. Even if it's not our perception of a simulation, it could be very well something close to it. Yeah.
How does simulation theory relate to mysticism, if it does? Like, because I know you were talking about like as far as religious symbolism, how that kind of relates, but just more directly to mysticism in general, does simulation theory fit in at all there?
I think you could think of the Matrix, honestly.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
they're just
too
hackers.
too up to date on simulation theory. Could you maybe summarize really quickly?
Well,
What the official
just the
definition?
whole idea that we live in a simulation, and that the math that's been done before points to the fact that it's more likely than not that we live in a simulation. And like we were talking about in the last podcast with Tupper, how there are certain aspects, like in quantum physics, how I don't know if you've ever seen the slit experiment. We don't have to go through this whole video again, but Dreams, if you could just like pull up the image, how
Some
if
of
you
it for sure.
send matter through two slits, like it'll spread out in a really weird way, but then if you observe it, if you get close and observe it, then it goes back to just um, lining up on two slits. So
Right.
it's almost like the simulation is saving energy. It's saving resources by not performing tasks that it wouldn't have to, since we're not observing it. You see
Right.
what I'm
It's doing
saying?
collision culling, right?
Yeah. Oh, there it
This
is.
is
Here.
They
There we go.
So yeah, they put
Yeah.
a solid piece of matter through a little slot. There are two slots, and the solid piece of matter behaved like a light pattern on the back wall. But when they took a camera with an electron camera and put it there to watch how the electrons were actually going through the two slits, it went back to behaving like physical matter. So
Yeah.
by the act of us observing it, it changed its behavior pattern of a physical piece of matter.
And that's like the same thing with quantum computers, is how quantum computers only work when we're not observing them. Like
But that gives the test to magic, because if our act of observing or being involved with matter in physical reality itself affecting the way that it behaves, then in a sense magic is possible, because our intention can change the outcome of reality to an extent.
that is
Right?
true. I didn't think about that.
Well, that could be one way to look at it for sure. Yeah, there is, it's a good moment to talk about this maybe. A lot of people who get used or get in contact with these ideas, even, the more widely or more mainstream ones, like Buddhism has kind of gone mainstream in the West, the idea of everything is an illusion, that would suggest that there's no reality to be experienced at all. I don't think that's necessarily what mysticism is trying to teach, or generally what esoteric traditions are trying to teach, right? Because there's the microcosm, like we talked about earlier, but there's always the macrocosm too. There is something out there that we are sharing. But sure, there might be, it might be more two-way than it is one-way. So that is definitely an understanding that you can do things even within the mind, and excite the mind and the self in certain ways that supposedly have an influence on outward reality. And that is one of the things that's understood for sure, in many different traditions.
Do you think that the word esoteric has a bad connotation to it? Because I know in its most basic form that esoteric means like of a small group, a
Yeah,
small
for the
group of
few,
people.
right?
Yeah, which kind of alludes to the whole cult meaning, which I
Yeah.
know you distance yourself from. So it's I don't know if that would be the best word use for it, or is that just simply how people use it now because words change meaning based on.
Yeah, I guess if you want to put a pun on it, we're demystifying the mystical, or de-occulting the occult, right? Trying to talk about these things in everyday language rather than pretending we're wizards with that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sure, I'm not gonna say that some of the people I've talked to aren't absolute wizards, in every sense of the word, but still they can express and interact with others about these subjects, just as we could have a chat about our favorite album or something. It doesn't all have to be like super weird and secret. So, yeah, should we use other words for that? I'm not sure, because at the end of the day, it's still kind of known as mysticism, esotericism, even if we're trying to make it available for more people, or accessible to more people.
Now, what type of mysticism do you practice? Like, I know that you educate on a lot of different kinds, but is there one particular one that you kind of stick to, or is it just you dabble in all of them and then take what you need from each part for your self-healing journey?
Yeah, well, it started out with the latter. When you start figuring out there's much more to study and understand than you might have thought at first. The first impulse for a lot of people, including myself, is just try and absorb as much as you can and as many different angles as you can. But at a certain moment, that becomes less practical. If you want to put stuff into practice, well, there's only so many things you can do in a day. So it's interesting to then follow the same pattern nature follows, right? Ebbs and flows. So in this case, the flow was where you sniff on everything, you try everything out, and then the ebb is where you distill it down to something more essential before maybe later on expanding a little more again. So I chose along the way to focus mostly on what seemed at the time the coolest to me, immature as that sounds, but yeah, it also fits me like a glove, I would say. It's just a general Western esoteric tradition, and most notably, the more modern synthesis of all these different ideas. There's, for example, this group, which the author I mentioned earlier, Israel Regardie, also was a part of in his time. It's the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Ring any bells?
Yeah.
Right. So they created the standard tarot deck, that you will see in many places, based off of more traditional tarot decks and mystical philosophy. They try to shoehorn all sorts of stuff into each other and make like a singular system out of it. And of course, they're not going to be able to do a good job or 100% good job, but they did so many great things, in creating like a semi-comprehensive system out of a whole lot that the Western tradition has to offer, and some of the Eastern too. That I figured, like, following this for a while and trying to get more skillful and with these methods, it's going to be like maybe high school, occult high school. So I figured I'm going to bite into this and cultivate for a couple of years, and then go back to the eclecticism and see what else there is, because yeah, I do want to avoid getting stuck in like one specific reality tunnel. And I should always remember where it started out. It is precisely claiming all the symbolism back from these old traditions, from the people who have abused these things in the past. For example, many people have problems with, well, for example, their Christian upbringing, especially in relation to what we know in history about Christianity. But then to go and reclaim these things, and make them meaningful again, instead of a bad association with the worst of human behavior. That's a really valuable thing, and you don't only have to do this, or you can do this with much more than just Christianity, right? So yeah, it's very interesting. And
So are you saying like you take the magic elements of different like cultures and religions and kind of like cherry pick them out of the associations that they have and kind of
I will
use
do
them?
that in the future again, but for now I'm restricting myself to really follow this system put forward by those wacky guys, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, because
Oh.
it's a good basis, like a springboard. Get your visualization skills and other skills down before you become more eclectic. Because eclecticism sounds fun, but it also bears a lot of responsibility. How are you going to make sure that you're doing it right, for example?
I gotta ask, do you have like the robe and like a wand?
Of course. Well, of course, you even have to ask.
I mean, I have a wand, but like I really want to get the robes too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you should make one yourself. That's what I did.
Oh, you make your own robes?
It's just a good
Was
one. I
that
did it with a friend who was really good at sewing. It was a very
Oh,
fun project. We did it with some dinner and wine and all that. It's have fun with it too, man.
hell yeah,
without the
dude.
robe, you're just a guy with a stick.
Is are the robes and wands like are those important to the practices themselves, or is it just kind of an accessory to feel more indulged in it?
Well, maybe both. There's many things many different traditions say about their implements. Of course, for the one it's absolutely essential and sacred and so on, but just really practically speaking, what better way to give your mind or your subconscious mind a signal like, okay, magic is going to happen now, other than putting on a robe and, I don't know, lighting incense. When you step into a temple room or temple space, even if it's something that you cleared up in your um, disorganized little room, you just put down whatever for the ritual, put on the robe, and you're suddenly in a different state of mind. So it's not just for the sake of feeling more into it. Feeling more into it actually makes the magic better. So it's all to do with exciting yourself, and getting these programs to run in your conscious at a high intensity, if you can use terminology like that, right? So use all the implements you need to bring that about, without causing a risk for yourself or others.
So is the robe and wand, is that like a Western thing, or is there like different clothing attires for different cultures, or is that pretty
Yeah, there's lots of
universal?
there's different attires, of course. If you look at what again they wear in the mosque or in the church or in a Buddhist or Shinto temple, right? They're all different robes, but they're all robes. The priest class or the practitioners are often recommended to do this kind of stuff. I think if you would want to bluntly summarize it, a kind of cleanliness, before communing with the divine, like put on my nice robes. um, because I'm going to receive high audience or something, or a white robe, or even a black robe might not be something of creepy cultists, but it's maybe a representation of the unmanifest, and then from that manifesting, like the darkness or whatever. Well, there's so many ways to approach this or think
Yeah.
about.
Also, I've heard of public speakers deciding on what clothing they wear to give a sense of like mood to the people that they're speaking to. And I've heard like turquoise is a very powerful color for getting people to absorb information that you're trying to relay upon them.
Isn't that
Yeah,
throat
for
chakra
Red.
color?
Sorry, what?
Isn't that throat chakra color?
I think so. I don't. I have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's bluish, I think, right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
You look like you've
Yeah,
got
I mean,
oh you
I'm
look
sorry.
like you've got something, Dreams, like
I do. I've got a bunch of things. I got a. Okay, so there was a podcast I used to listen to, and this guy, Freeman TV is his website. He's like a conspiracy / esoteric kind of guy. And in his podcast, he predicted that on the upcoming Super Bowl halftime show, with using Aleister Crowley's tarot deck, that there would be a woman riding a giant lion or a beast on the stage, based on the timing of the stars and the sun and like and what he figured that they would choose. And Katy Perry came out on a halftime show on this giant scarlet, or like wearing a red suit and a.
Are you kidding me, dude?
And it was like I listened to this and heard his prediction, and then like the next day he's like, I didn't really, I don't know anything, man. I just looked at the stars, looked at the sun, looked at the cards, and went, that's what it's gonna be, and it was.
So he wasn't even expecting for it to.
No, yeah, he predicted 9/11 too, but he was like, I did that based on magic, not knowing anything. That there was something to do with 9/11, because 9 is mankind's number, and 10 is God's number, and 11 is the magician's number. So 9/11 means to go past God and become a magician.
Jeez.
Holy shit.
I mean,
The Mandalay Bay shooting was at 9th and 11th Street, so it's always something.
And it was right next to the Luxor, right? It was right next to that big pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Oh, was that with the guy that went up in the hotel?
Yeah, he was on
Yeah,
what was it?
yeah.
The 100 something? But no, there wasn't 100. It was like the 39th floor, I think.
No, we trained him how to reload, so he just had like 30 fucking guns instead.
Yeah,
And
that
one
was
more question.
Really weird. Yeah, really sad.
Tara, when you see this picture, what do you see? Like, what do you feel?
Ooh,
Like,
I'd rather not get
tells
too
you?
far into that, but nothing good. Let's just keep it to that.
Oh, okay. That's all I wanted to know. It was just my kind of question. I wanted to know the answer. That's good.
Wait, what's 14 in numerology?
It's
I think
gematria.
that one relates specifically to an Egyptian myth, but yeah, it's muddy ground, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'd
Oh,
rather
by the
not
way,
go
that was
into
Hillary Clinton's campaign manager.
what? And he had like was that tattooed on his hands?
Yeah, I
think
know
it
he
was-
had
I think it
14
was
and the
marker,
Jesus
right?
fish. You know what's interesting? Those same two symbols were on the guy's gun that did the shooting on that island.
On
The
in New
Norwegian
Zealand?
guy. That guy that on his gun he had the 14 and that fish on his gun.
I don't know, but that guy also, I think he was trying to stir shit up when that happened, because you remember he said right before he did it, he was like, remember, subscribe to PewDiePie. And then that, which, you know, PewDiePie had absolutely no association with that. And he came out and was like, I can't believe that, which I feel bad for him now, because now he has to think of that every time that happens, is his name was uttered by him before he killed all those people. But I think sometimes that people will assign meaning to those things when it's not there, or it's just they do it on purpose in order to stir shit up. And I think that's kind of what that guy was doing, is he was trying to find as many different things that could get conspiracy theorists to just go ape shit. Especially because
Probably,
like
you're probably right.
he was on 4chan, and that's where he posted right before, like he posted the Facebook link right before that happened. So I think that more had to do with him just, you know, shit posting and wanting to stir things up.
And I have another question about ley lines and doing magic on ley lines. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's another good question. Until quite recently, actually, I had taken a break from this subject, but I saw some video from the Smithsonian, which I'm not really sure what kind of an institution that is, but they do some dowsing near a supposed ley line crossing point, you know, like a hot point on the supposed grid. And well, the dowsing sticks do all sorts of weird stuff in the video. You know, that kind of piqued my interest, especially because I couldn't really find anything that suggested this Smithsonian was really like an untrustworthy institution, or. But you know, it's one of those things that I feel like it could be interesting to pursue, but there are more dire subjects for me in my own life to tackle head on, which take priority over.
Yeah. Everything I know about the occult is just the things that interest me, and I've never
Right.
actually gone and practiced anything. So that's why I bring up these silly
Yeah,
things.
it's a super interesting subject, though. Like, it seems like there's definitely something weird going on with grids and distances on Earth. Also, if you look up some of Graham Hancock's work, he's particularly interested in what we might have forgotten about the past of Earth. Civilizations that may have lived. He will present in his lectures this image of Earth with certain monolithic sites marked, and it is at very specific intervals, right? And then there is this certain monolithic sites that do not fit the grid perfectly. But then when you go back in time, you look at how the sea levels were back in, I think it was like the last ice age or something around that time. Then suddenly there were land masses above belonging to these monolithic sites that are again perfectly in sync with this grid, right? So these are all ancient buildings that were built in different periods of time too, like the Easter Island is on there, the Giza pyramids are on there, Angkor Wat is on there, which is actually quite recently built compared to the other ones, right? So again, I'm not too sure what's going on here, but why are so many people concerned with these grids? It's definitely something to pursue and not necessarily dismiss as some kooky, weird stuff. I mean, there's the gigantic buildings standing there to, poking us in the eye. What are you going to do with that? So, but again, it's not something I'm knowledgeable about, so I don't like speculating about it much.
Didn't didn't Graham Hancock write a bunch of books on like Egypt or something?
Oh yeah, Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah.
What's the other one about
Magicians of the
magician?
Gods. This is a
Yeah,
recent one.
What
I
does
actually
that
just listened to
entail?
this
He's got
one.
really awesome presentations too. Sorry, what was that? Too short.
Oh, I just said I actually just finished listening to his big debate on Joe Rogan from like 3 years ago, where he had like the geologist and the other critics,
Yeah.
and that was heated, man. Holy
Those
cow!
episodes are some of the most interesting. Absolutely. Oh, was that the one also with like the skeptic?
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Painful to watch because he didn't do skeptical science much good in that episode.
no.
How do you feel about numerology? I don't know if I've touched on that, but
Um, well, it's tricky, right? This is something I looked into quite recently. Is this thing, for example, angel numbers, right? What if I see 1111 on my clock? Does it mean God is talking to me? Well, I couldn't find any traditional resources that are suggesting these kind of things. It's maybe also because digital clocks aren't very old, right? So it was very curious to me. Like I couldn't find this definitive source where this idea came from, but I do know that it's not very old. But then, for example, if you look at Kabbalah and Gematria, which is an essential part of that, it's all of a sudden is very important, and that is literally the numerology to do with light. I think that's an important thing. But you look at other traditions, maybe the Pythagoreans, they're known for how they perceived number to be holy. They had all sorts of mathematical based notions of divinity and so on. So again, it seems like one of those central things, right? Wherever you look, there's some kind of an understanding about numbers and their mystical meaning.
now dreams. I don't know if you can pull this up. What's the number that I think it's in Japan where they don't
Four.
build the fourth floor, that they don't build hospital
I think that's
like beds
China.
on.
It's the
Well,
Yeah,
fourth
it's
floor.
in
four
Japan
is the
too.
number of. Oh, right. Well, excuse
Four
me.
means death in Japanese.
Oh, it's Japan too, right? I thought it was China.
Shin means death. As the Shinigami from Death Note,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They don't have a fourth floor in their hospitals.
why would you want to stay on the floor of death? It's like
Exactly. It's extremely bad luck. And they're very like I don't know. What's the word?
superstitious.
Superstitious people, yeah. They believe in a lot of esoteric stuff.
Well, I mean, we do that here too. I was at a hotel recently, and they didn't have a 13th floor. Like it's
Yeah,
what
that's the
what
thing
And
in the States,
what does
right?
that
then there's
even
the
root
whole
back
thing
to?
about feng shui as well. I think that's Chinese. It's like the idea that if you have a house that's built improperly, it's bad energy. Like for instance, if you have windows in the front and windows in the back, and you can see all the way through the house, that's really bad energy because like it just goes right through the whole house.
Right.
Or I,
So shotgun houses are bad energy.
that's what I've heard in feng shui. You're not supposed to have a house that you can see all the way through from the street, like outside to the backyard.
I think that's also just bad for. I mean, if anyone wanted to come and rob you, they could just look and see like, oh, there's the entire house. There's everything I need right there. I can already see. So maybe it's that too.
Yeah, it's just the fact that it attracts thieves, right? So that's the bad energy that you get.
Do you
Yeah, isn't
know?
it the same with like the don't put your bed in front of a door? You know, like in some way there might be esoteric connotations, but also if somebody wanted to harm you, they could shoot you through the door while you're sleeping, or I don't know, have an easier time harming you, or something like that. Something I
Yeah,
heard about.
that's a good point that you bring up because I think there are certain aspects of like superstitious things that we do that are they seem silly on the front of it, but on the like when you get down to it, it's actually
Yeah,
smarter because of just like greater fears that we have.
yeah, or had maybe. Just the other day, I saw some article about somebody getting a very nasty parasite from pork. You know, because maybe he didn't prepare it correctly or whatever. Well, if you don't bother with food that can be prepared incorrectly, well, that's a whole lot of health issues less to worry about, maybe, right? Just an idea. But again, you know, there can be so much to this. Maybe there's more to read in between the lines, and I think that's also one of the great things about mystical text. You know, on the surface, it could be maybe an interesting story with something to it, but maybe if you read between the lines, there's something like a deeper meaning encoded. And then hopefully you have some friends to talk about with like, am I going crazy, or are you also reading this in between these lines, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's super interesting.
I need to go grab something real quick. Two stroke. Talk about astrology for a second while I go grab something.
All right. Astrology. Is it bullshit for white people or like upper class snobs, or is it like actually real? Do the planets actually do anything? Like the moon, right? Like the
Right.
moon.
Yeah, and seawater and all that, you know, making the wave.
Yeah.
Well, sure, maybe. You know, again, I would be inclined to
Nostradamus.
say there is some influence there. Oh, sorry.
So Nostradamus, that's all he used, and he was right like 100% of the time.
Well, I'm not sure about 100%, but for sure there was some interesting stuff there. But again, it's something that's represented in many different traditions. I'm not sure if this is because it all came from one place and then it traveled other places and people picked it up, or if people came to this independently. But you know, there's Eastern astrology, there's Jewish astrology, there's Egyptian, Greek astrology, and they have, of course, influenced. Especially if the people that were practicing these things were closer together. But it's one of those things. It's such a it's one of the elephants in the room. You know, like, is it really true?
Do you
But
what
to
like what
also see that, again, the popularized version of it is nothing like quote unquote actual astrology, right? It's so much
right.
more complicated. There's so many
Yeah.
things to look at, to learn, not just one, your sun sign, but all these different things and how they relate to each other, and the angles, which a decan, which of the 10 degrees of a zodiac sign is which planet inside of. It just goes on and on. It's ridiculous, honestly, depth of
Yeah,
it.
I've
Like
heard that a lot of readings, like astrology readings, are incorrect because the planets move. They don't stay the same spot. So when you were given that reading at that age, yes, you were that sign, but time has moved and all the planets and the stars and everything have shifted since then. So you have to give it like a totally different reading based on how long or how old you are.
Yeah,
Like
and
there's many
very
factors that'll
deep.
change it.
you can take it as deep as you want to take it, right? And I do believe that if you want to do astrology proper, and talk about what may happen at certain times, you're supposed to take a snapshot or a chart, astrological chart, and chart on there all these different elements you want to look at. So yeah, that depends on the moment, and also maybe the people involved, and many other things. But in magic, it seems like straight up ceremonial magic. It seems like astrology is actually one of the, if you can use the word, master keys, right? There's so many sources that talk about if you want to make it work and not just be an improvising imbecile, you need to get your astrological calculations right, and do it in the right hour, planetary hour of the right day, because all these different forces supposedly are at work and may increase the chance of things happening or decrease them.
I feel like you just described me to a T, improvising imbecile with my magic.
I think that
everybody starts there, right? So do I.
I think that the myth aspect of it is cool. The myth aspect of astrology is cool, but then aside from that, like using it to make your compatibility with your partners is just utter bullshit for white women. But it's, I don't know, like I like going out and looking at the stars and then looking for constellations, and
Yeah, you actually mentioned something very important there. Like if you use astrology and study the symbols and the archetypes and all these different things, and you use them as a book of philosophy, to learn about again the out there reality, the macrocosm and the microcosm, and suddenly it becomes like a language that is used to describe much of what's happening in nature, or can be used. Therefore, again, like we said earlier, there's many models, right? And the map is not the territory, like Robert Anton Wilson famously put in his book. So it's why not use another language? You could, right? But there's certain qualities to certain subtleties to astrological language, which makes it very fitting to talk about things that happen in the universe and in our person. So dismiss astrology as a divination tool? Well, sure, I can see why you would do that, but dismiss it as a system of mysticism, I wouldn't do that. I think it's definitely worth studying, and you'll see also that the modern tarot that is heavily linked to astrology. For example, the major arcana cards, 22 cards, have all been associated to planets, to zodiac signs, to elements. And all of the lesser arcana cards, the four suits, they are, most of them are one planet in a certain beacon of a zodiac sign. That's where they derive their character or meaning from. It's like Leo in Aries. What does that mean? And so on. So yeah, it's a very central thing and worth studying if you're trying to get a broad understanding of mystical philosophy, esoteric philosophy. Then astrology is worth learning, but only because you're interfacing with all the symbolism in a very direct way, right? So yeah,
that's the thing. Is I think that astrology is getting a bad rap because of the way that people use it mostly currently. So obviously the alignment of the stars is important, and it has been important for millennia, because that's how we used to tell time, and that's how we've counted the seasons and things like that.
That's more astronomy, right? That's like the bare bones measuring of the movements and so on.
Yeah.
Astrology is sort of like the supposedly mystical meaning or symbolism that's going on, or something like that.
Yeah, so I think that it gets a bad rap, and if you probably look into it, it's surely interesting and can be used as like not as a guide in itself, but more as a accessory to what you guys are doing. Like an accessory to the learning process, instead of being like, oh, you're a Leo. I don't get along with Leos very well.
Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to work. But that's also so wonderful, about being involved in mysticism, even just a little bit. You get to comfortably not care about however other people are ruining these things. You get to fully enjoy the value that you find in it and the uses that you have for it, without having to worry about, what other people do with it, in a sense. I mean, you could, and I definitely feel like it's part of the mission of VRM. Like, why is the library there? It's because if you Google tarot, if you Google astrology, you'll find 1,000 books, but only 2 of them might be worth reading, if you're going to be really blunt about it. So yeah, it's definitely good if people get a chance to see beyond the nonsense, and read a real good book about a subject like that, even
Do
if
you have
after
a
that they say, like, never mind, it's not for me.
Do you
Sorry.
have a book you'd recommend?
On astrology,
One that's not bullshit, like you said.
not really. Yeah, just look in the VRM, in the VR Mystery School library. It's one of the subjects I'm least versed in because it's so difficult. So I've been in touch with the symbolism a lot through things like tarot and what I needed to learn for ceremonial magic, and also making sense of reflection and so on, and just internalizing the systems generally. But yeah, I'm just picking up what I can find. So these titles, they've escaped me now, but you can find them in the library for now, if you really want to.
You brought up something I want to cover real quick, which is this is more just general as a community, how you feel about like gatekeeping, because
Yep.
obviously, so I don't want to name the community that it was because then it'd be very obvious what I'm talking about, but there was a community that I joined and I was a very active part of. It was a very small community. There were maybe like 20 people in it, and I was learning about the process that they were teaching, and getting super into it, and I was able to communicate well with all of them, and I was very comfortable. And then this one YouTuber made a video about it, and this person has like 800,000 subscribers, and they put the Discord in the description of that video, and suddenly
Mm.
like 2,000 people joined instantaneously. And then you have all of these people who I think just want to be associated with the clout of, hey, you were in a popular video and now I get to be a part of that. And they don't want to actually learn. And so whenever communities grow to such a large scale, it's hard to vet people, and you have people who are quite obviously bullshitting, and then you have the people who really want to learn, and it's hard to separate those things and to be able to teach those people while also keeping out the ones who are just trying to incite stuff.
Yeah.
So do you think that gatekeeping is an important aspect of something, especially as niche as magic? Like, there are always going to people who try and troll. Like with Pastor Brock, who I had on the first episode, he has people go in and just spam stuff and use crazy avatars all the time because people. There are people who just don't think that it's a valid form or valid format to do in VR.
Mhm.
And then there's like, there's a world in VR where they I went in one time. It's just a bunch of Japanese people doing yoga, and that's what they do every morning is they do yoga. And there are people sometimes who go in and just try to like fuck with the instance, and that's kind of the important part is keeping those people separated so that way you can keep your core community. I'm going on too long, but my point is do you think that gatekeeping is good for a magic community?
Right. Well, could you just really quickly define once more gatekeeping? Because
Gatekeeping
yeah,
is like keeping people out purposefully for the purpose of the integrity of the group itself. So like you don't want
right.
outsiders in because you know that the core community you have currently is trustworthy and able to maintain the integrity of the group.
Yeah, right. So when I hear the word gatekeeping, usually it's for me associated with people gatekeeping about petty things. But when you put it like that, I was gonna say no, I don't want to be a gatekeeper, but I went into the project without even planning to start a community around it, right? So, but then it grew, and some people came along, and well, then it grew even more. And at some point, you just cannot be happy-go-lucky, naive anymore, and you need to add some kind of structure because well, as we've talked about, there are right ways and wrong ways to do these kind of things, even personal development, and there's right and wrong ways to get in contact with the subject matter, right? I've seen many people who are very eager to spread misinformation or spread information with no regard for who they are spreading it to, right? So, well, along the way, and also based on my previous experiences, in general occult communities and so on, there grew a sense like, okay, something needs to happen to the point where, there can be this low, what do you call it? It's easy to enter the community for sure, and easy
Oh,
to
just
participate.
accessible, like an
Yeah,
accessible
it
community.
should be super accessible, just like the world itself is made to make the subject matter more accessible for people. But at the same time, there's going to be people, again, coming in who are either completely off the rails or have bad intentions, or they're looking to promote something, or, well, there could be 1,000 reasons why there should be some kind of moderation thing going on. But really, it's the part of it that I enjoy least. Also on Discord, a lot of people will show up there, some people will show up there who actually don't join us in VR. And what I do notice is that in VR, people are very more forthcoming than maybe they would be when sitting behind a keyboard or even Discord voice chat. So the people who do join us, they usually are very forthcoming and easy to interact with for everybody, and that's really great. But yeah, there have been instances where either things get misunderstood or pulled out of context, or people are danger to themselves, or spreading misinformation. And sadly, yeah, I have to do my best to estimate, how do we react to this? But thank God I'm no longer alone with this. There's now some awesome volunteers, and I should mention them also by name, maybe at the end of the podcast, or maybe I should do so now. Rian, Nicolas, alias Entity, they're volunteering now, and thanks to them, I not the whole burden is on me. I don't have to always make the best decision, because there's more people who can weigh in on these things and guarantee that what we're doing is healthy, right? And luckily, they're all pretty experienced too in their own practice, and also in online communities. So that's super helpful. And it's not something like I want to grow as fast as possible in any way. That's not working. Like you say, it's a niche thing. Um, but the intention of the project is to spread the good practices, the good ideas. So you cannot really do that while maintaining a close community. It's not on the agenda to keep a close community. The more people, the merrier.
How
Um,
how how big do you see this scaling, your community?
I have no idea. It's already like 1,000 times bigger than I thought it would be.
Do you have an end game?
Nope. Well, just help people get in contact with the stuff that helped me along the way, right?
Like, do you
That's
think
really it.
you'll ever monetize anything? Do you think you'll have like maybe an institution? Like maybe you could be like the first virtual or VR chat school, who knows? Where you like
Who
just teach.
knows? I think who knows is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Like I also learned, it's most fun when you don't have, anything beyond an ambition to do good. Because
Yeah.
if I just keep focusing on doing what is good and what is awesome and what is helping people, then whatever will come, right? But I'm definitely, it's funny to mention this. I started in December 2019, and I quit working on the project in like March, maybe, thinking like, oh, this is just, it was a fun thing to work on for a little while, but it's time to move on. But then I did see, I want to talk with people about this. And VR is an emerging medium that is exceedingly well suited for this, for the kind of intimate interactions, and even doing lectures and all those kind of things, and having interactive learning tools and all that stuff. So yeah, it's just a really cool project to keep working on. And I decided actually that probably for the rest of my life, I'll try to use new technology to make the fruits of mysticism and personal development more accessible to people. That's the end game, I guess, and we'll see where it takes us.
That's so reassuring to hear that you're not just out here for like some end game Patreon thing.
No, no. I actually sacrificed a lot in the past months to give the project a proper boost, but that turned out so amazingly well. It's really a joy also to work on it, and to see how other people are also enjoying this. You know, it's not just for nothing. There's people. Sometimes I catch people that aren't even part of the community. You know, it's like I'm on my tea break in the afternoon, and I go into the library, and somebody's standing at the tarot decks practicing and studying or whatever. Right? And I'll come back 2 hours later, and they're still standing there. You know, and I'm checking. They're not AFK. You know, they're still working on this stuff. That's like, how crazy awesome is that? And I'll never talk to that person, but they still had a meaningful experience there. I hope. And yeah, that's just really triggering me to keep on with it.
Do you feel like a pioneer in the VR space, or at least the learning space in VR?
Mm, in some ways, yes. Like, I don't believe that there's really any places where you can approach, you know, these weird subjects in such a candid and humane, or I don't know what the word is, way, you know, where it's just all so easy, and the quality is relatively high. I know of a lot of good communities, but they're just not on the surface. They're not accessible to average Joe or Jill who is running around VR chat, right? So yeah, it is unique. But you know, I'm also in interaction design professionally. I've seen many examples over the past years of people doing crazy things. And this is definitely not a first time somebody is doing a learning through VR. You know, even in hospitals, they've been using VR with weird controllers that looked like the operation instruments, you know, to train surgeons and so on. This has gone on for many years. But you know, such an open community where the discourse is on a pretty good level, you know, where there's not a lot of off-putting insanity going on. I think that's pretty unique. Yeah.
I think you touched on hospitals. I think on the institutional side that things are much more isolated, to where there's no sense of community in that. It's more of just, here's a tool that we happen to have in the institution and you can use that. Whereas you are creating a community, like, you know, some of the other people who have started teaching. You're creating a community that anyone can access from anywhere, and that's the most important part. Is, I mean, you're
Yeah.
in Amsterdam, and you know, we're in the United States, and we're talking about mysticism, whereas
Sure.
anybody can come and join that. And that's what's cool. Is anyone can buy an Oculus Quest for, what are they, $400, 350, something like that, and you can get one of those and then jump on and learn. And
Yeah,
that's
or even on PC, right? We've actually got quite a couple community regulars which are on PC, and I myself, I don't even have a VR set. Still waiting for the day to walk around and see the full scale of the building and so on. I hear it's pretty great.
that's crazy to me that you have this institution like uh thing in VR, yet you haven't even seen it in VR. That's
Yeah, it's really kind of crazy. It's also a bit esoteric, right? Like, there's a definite, like, a barrier between your experience of that place when you walk around in it and mine. Like, you have the initiation. For me, I'm kind of an onlooker still, which is really funny to me, you know.
how do you see,
Yeah,
like, oh,
I was saying, yeah, when you make a world in Unity and then put on a VR headset and walk around in that physical world, you feel like really powerful. Like you are the creator of the world you are now inhabiting. Like, it's a weird
yeah,
feeling.
even with this world, I mean, Bornato was making it, and I was like, yeah, that looks cool. But then I came and stepped into it, and I'm like, holy shit, okay, this feels like a real space
It
I
really
can hang
does.
out with.
Even on
And
PC, it's really great space, this one.
thank you. But yeah, it's I think that is the key. I mean, I've seen some other like VR podcasts that they have, but they're held in like alt space where they just stand around in a circle and talk to each other, and it's not even really a podcast. Whereas this, I think, is one of the first actual spaces to be built like a podcast, to where you feel like you're in a podcasting environment. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, to me, the bridge between uh the fake and real communities is having that environment. The environment is the most important part. I remember John Carmack talking about how in the future there's going to be times where people can live in awful homes, yet they will hop in VR and they live in these really nice, like, lavish homes, and they can go see these incredible spaces. So they don't it's kind of dystopian, but they don't feel so bad about their current situation because they can go and experience that, and it's pretty lifelike.
Yeah.
And that is what we're very rapidly approaching right now, is to where, like, I still know right now I can see the lines around my headset, and I if I look closely, I can still see the screen door effect, and I still know that I have something that weighs, like, what is it, 7 pounds on my head, and it takes you out of it. But once we're reaching that point where it's like from the Oculus CV1 to now, you have these headsets that are so close to where we need to be to feel fully immersed
Yeah,
that
for sure.
it's a transitional period where those communities are starting to build up. So you have these niche things that no one would have even thought about being in VR becoming a space in VR, because the technology is transitioning and we're reaching along. We're getting newer trackers here soon. I think the Index is making a wireless headset, and I'm pretty sure HTC or some other company was working with one to have eye tracking within the headset,
Yeah,
so
so
that way you
that's
can
how cool is
focus
that one?
on different things. So you have that depth of field, which is amazing to me that we're getting to that point. So I think it's really cool what you're doing, because
Oh,
people don't think about certain aspects of learning in VR, but then whenever they discover them, they're excited and they want to go experience that. So now that that's available to anyone and they don't have to go to a physical space, especially for people with, like, anxiety, or
yeah,
um, they don't have the means to travel to places like that, or they live in weird spots, they can go to these communities without having to actually physically be there. So people are
totally.
learning things in this VR space. So
Yeah,
I think in
it's
that
very
sense
great.
you are a pioneer.
Thanks. Well, that's very awesome to hear. And I do think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, you can have the hardware, but the environment is also very important to the immersion you're experiencing. And again, up until quite recently, when VRM became a thing and the community started growing, I was having all these interactions with people either through text or this distant Discord voice chat or something like that. And when you really step into the same VR space, I'm even with the distance I'm experiencing through being a PC user, the interaction is of a different order of magnitude. It's so much more engaging. Even talking about subjects that I would feel have worn me out, after dealing with them for a long time. And then you step into VR space and talk to people about it, and suddenly there's this true energy flowing back and forth, like a reinvigoration of being able to talk with people about all sorts of things. I think it's going to be absolutely crazy as technology moves on and develops on, and as people become more skillful at creating stuff. Yeah, we're in for an interesting future. But yeah, to get back onto the point, which you said, the living in a bad place, and then using VR as escapism. I think that is also a risk, like just as the internet
Oh
gave
yeah,
us so
yeah.
much, but it also became a crutch or escapism for many. I hope that VR can be used to empower us and our real lives too. And, that maybe seeing how things can be will also motivate us in real life to try and make changes, for the better, for ourselves, for our local community, maybe the world, wherever you can reach. Um, so I think that's also very important. Yeah, hopefully we can learn to maintain a balance. I was just thinking about this yesterday. I mean, we've had cars for so long, and people are still kind of learning to cope with how we should use those. Imagine some crazy new technology like VR. There's a lot of things to keep in mind when we're starting to explore it, especially regarding how close it is to our experience, and the psyche and all that. Really interesting times.
So I want to go back to magic for a second because I just thought of something. What do you think of like high figures in governments and things like that using magic? Like, I don't know, Two Stroke, you know about some of the instances of that.
Well, you got like, John D. You got
Yeah.
people, you got the CIA with the gateway, HemiSync and all that stuff, trying to fucking remote view.
Just to throw one into that list, you've got like experimental psychotherapy, which is many times these days bordering on mystical and shamanic practices, being brought into visionary experiences to pretty much immediately alleviate traumas and other things like that. And yeah, sorry, you were going on to Stroke. Anything else to add in the list?
Like, some billionaires are really into like
Lady
mysticism,
Gaga,
like
right?
astrology.
Wasn't there
Yeah,
also
like
Project MK Often? Like, wasn't that a thing?
Which is that?
MK Ultra?
No, it was called
You
MK.
mean
Look that up, Dreams. MK
MK
Often.
Often?
Yeah, I don't think it was MK Ultra. I think it was called like MK Often. Ugh, MK Often. I'm pretty sure it was like they were. It was originally.
It was a covert U.S. Department of Defense program developed in conjunction with the Central Intelligence Agency. It was initiated in 1966 following other parallel programs such as MK Ultra.
Okay, so it was a program along with MK Ultra. What's
A
that
partner
second?
program
What's that
to
second
program
program?
MK.
I guess
I
it could
don't.
get maybe sort of
Project Artichoke was what they renamed Project MK Ultra to. I know that, but I don't know what MK
I know that there was
Often
some
was.
occult stuff associated with
Oh,
that.
it was used to test the behavioral toxicological effects of certain drugs on animals and humans. So that's the one where they were literally going out and putting fucking LSD into homeless people's coffee cups so that they could study them to see what would happen.
Oh,
Damn.
jeez.
That's really bad.
Isn't that what they did
Yeah,
to Ted
that's-
Kaczynski too? Like that was an MK
Yeah.
Ultra.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He was a mind control puppet. A lot of the big heavy hitters, serial killers and stuff, there's always hints of that. There's always something connecting them to some governmental program. Or something. It's
Well, I
so,
should also say it's kind of interesting actually. We're going through this first chapter of Prometheus Rising in week's reading and discussion, and the chapter is called "What the Thinker Thinks, the Prover Proves." So it is a little bit risky when going down these rabbit holes, to stay completely what do you call it, objective.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
And while I'm not going to sit here and say that governments throughout history have done us only favors, but it's pretty risky when you go down the path and when you go look for signs of MK Ultra, in the list of most popular serial killers, for example. You will always find them because you're looking for them.
Oh yeah,
So-
yeah, the rose tinted glasses type of thing where if you're only
Kind of.
if you only see
Ultra tinted glasses.
well, yeah, exactly. Where if you only see that, that's all you're going to find. But
Yeah.
it-
But there's so much weird, dodgy stuff going on. I'll give it plain and simple to you, right? My first inclination to look into any of this was, what are these guys at Bohemian Grove doing, man? Like,
Oh. didn't
They got-
what did
they got so
Nixon
much
say
money
about it? He
power.
and I
Isn't-
quote, this
He's
is
a
this is
bunch-
not. He said it was the
he
most
said
like
something about a bunch of homosexual thing. He's
yeah.
ever
He
seen.
said like
He's
it was the most
bunch of-
homosexual thing I've ever been to. I'm pretty sure you
Well,
can find that on like the official thing about
I'm gonna
Bohemian
quote
Grove.
Alex Jones, but he was saying that it was started by, who was the guy, Tom Sawyer, the guy who wrote Tom Sawyer. I can't.
Oh,
Fuck, I can't remember his name.
Just to really quickly finish my point, right? So
Oh yeah, sorry.
the video I've seen, that was my most memorable getting in contact with that whole story. And I'm not even sure if it is a real video or not. It seems to be pretty darn real, but it was just the idea. Okay, these people are so rich and powerful and important. If they think there's something in this kind of stuff, well, what is there, right? And that was pretty much when I started reading as much as I could. And some years after I realized it completely changed me what I read, even without my intention, for the better. So yeah, to get back at the MKUltra stuff and so on, really, if supposedly magic is following the rules of nature, the laws of nature, then just as cognitive psychology can be abused by advertisers, sure, anybody who knows how to use it and or knows, on the deep level how human psyche and emotions and so on work, they could use or abuse this any way they see fit. So, well, we all know how humans are capable of great things as well as great horrors, right? So, I don't see any particular reason to say, well, this one thing is off limits to use or manipulation by people with bad intentions. It would be ridiculous to say that humans are, known for mucking up every so often, and that they wouldn't do so in this particular case, right? So yeah, sure. Again, it's so difficult to make super clear and clear-headed statements about this stuff, but every so often you'll see something weird, maybe, right? Like the Katy Perry on a lion, or I don't know, some other stuff. It will point you into a certain direction, maybe. But at the same time, there's no denying that Freemasons are, at least in their teachings, are very concerned with the same stuff that ceremonial magicians use for their stuff. So whether or not they interpret it properly or use it for good or bad, that probably depends on the Freemason you're talking about and the lodge he belongs to and so on.
The
But
Freemasons use magic?
well, that's maybe a stretch, but the system of teachings is based on Neoplatonism, on Kabbalah, on a lot of the traditional Western esoteric mysteries, so to speak. It's an essential part of the teachings. But whether or not these teachings are being practiced, what do you call it, like truly, or whether it's just something that is being passed down as trivia, it really depends on the practitioner or the lodge, I would say. But at the core, the system is absolutely based on Renaissance magical thinking.
If your secret society isn't using magic, are you even a secret society?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Are we going to talk about the color of our underwear? Like, that's not an interesting secret.
Well, I guess for my final question here, I want to ask, what's on your bucket list?
That's a really good one. Traveling,
Traveling.
for sure.
Where to?
I want to visit, places where you don't even have to try to have a mystical experience. I guess that is one way to put it. Beautiful sites, whether natural or man-made. Historical sites. Those always give me good vibes, especially when you learn to open up a little bit and push your rationality to the background a little bit when you're going there. It's absolutely amazing to just, I don't know, even locally, my local forest, walk in there and be overcome with all sorts of things that are not possible to put to words. So that's something I would love to experience in more places in the world. But yeah, I guess I'd also like to actually make a bucket list and then start crossing things off. I don't actually have one. So thanks for reminding me.
So
Have
do
you
you
been
think
to
if you
anywhere?
oh
Have you been to anywhere like big sites, like maybe not as grand as like the pyramids or anything, but like you mentioned your forest,
I
but
have to say, my life has been pretty so far, and I haven't had many options. But thanks to this kind of stuff, I've learned how to slowly fast track personal development more, and also overcome obstacles that are limiting my behavioral freedom, so to speak.
yeah.
So
do you think when you start traveling that you'll become like you'll start teaching on the road, like you'll continue this this
I
mystery
hope I'll
school?
start learning on the road for sure. And if I can, again, I don't like this word teaching very much, but if I can contribute in a meaningful way to other people's experiences, in this wacky reality we're sharing, then that's always awesome. So I'll definitely try.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope to see you traveling soon. Hopefully with a quest or something. You can
Oh, that would be
do it
great.
anywhere. Do your VR mystery school anywhere. Well, I will leave the VR mystery school website in the description for anyone who wants to check it out and at least just check out the
Awesome.
world because that's linked there. But I've loved having you on. This was great. I learned a lot about magic and mysticism and other things relating to that. So,
Awesome.
so
Yeah, I hope
thank
I
you.
was able to do it justice because it's definitely a subject easily misrepresented, but it's good to at least get the thinking going, and the conversation can always continue at a later time. Or yeah, well, thank you very much. It was very fun.
Yeah,
My
thank
first
you.
time ever being interviewed for anything, and I absolutely loved it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we will catch you guys all
Hold
in the
on.
next one. What?
Do we have to be done?
Do we have to?
Like,
I
is there
mean,
a time limit?
there's no time limit.
Like, can we just go off the rails and just talk about whatever comes to mind?
I mean, we
I could
could.
maybe for a half an hour more for sure. If I could get maybe a quick bio break.
Yeah, you wanna put on the I can put on the break button and we can just come back to it here in a second. You wanna do that?
It'll only be a couple
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, I want to
So
go off the rails,
right
man.
back.
All right.
Sure, let's go
Whatever.
off the rails for half an hour.
It's like when Alex Jones was like, "Want to go for 4 hours?"
Oh, we can do a 4 hour one in the future. You guys
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
going totally crazy. Yeah. But I'll be right back. Yeah.
All right.
In a minute.
I'll we'll be back in a second.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go.
All right.
All right. Welcome back.
Hey, welcome back.
So, what were we talking about?
know.
Traveling. That's what we were talking about. Where would you travel first? I want to ask that.
Well, I've wanted to go to Japan for a long time.
I think we all have. I think that's
Yeah.
every person in VR chat you ask where they want to go first. Japan is their first answer.
Yeah, it's not just I'm not actually too much into the Japanese
Anime,
pop culture
yeah.
as it gets consumed in the West. But, just the way they do their things, whether it's making music, cleaning the street, all these things. There's some kind of an attentiveness in there, which is totally awesome. I would love to eat some great food prepared, by an actual Japanese chef, and just taste, the attention that went into that and the care. That would be great. Those kind of things, or visit the holy sites, meet some. How cool would that be?
Is there any like specific nature sites you have in mind? Like,
Well, I don't actually. I'm not super great at information or data recollection. So I probably have some stuff written down somewhere, but nothing particular by name. Although Iceland, of course, something I want to see too, and Nordic Lights and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's maybe not even super interesting. It's just the places that everybody wants to see. I'd like to see them too, and of course, I'm looking at it with my own eyes. But yeah, that's not the most interesting part about me, I suppose.
right. So, you said this all started with your like Discovery Bohemian Grove, right? Like,
Yeah. So I mentioned, this personal trouble I went through, and then incidentally some things came on my path, and then it was this idea of apparently these rich, powerful, and quote unquote developed people are mostly concerned with this, whether it's artists, writers, even in history, right, politicians, and that also with the insight. Okay, so hey, maybe there could even be somebody profiting of the fact that I'm not being my most self.
yeah,
I let go of that thought quite a long time ago, thankfully, because I don't think too much of conspiracy stuff is very healthy. But that was definitely where it started out for me. Learning that well, what is a better screw you to all of those people who might benefit from my misery than becoming no longer miserable. But thankfully, also it evolved from that into something a little more mature, and it's no longer a counter reaction to anything. It's just something that works well.
So you said like conspiracies aren't really like mentally healthy in a way, like getting obsessed about them. You have like any popular conspiracy theories that you kind of do believe, like I don't know, like reptilians or some shit?
Mm, it's a very tough one. I just generally believe that as far as, or as long as humans have existed, there has been a power struggle, or a struggle between those who want power and those who want freedom. And that takes on all sorts of shapes and forms. And again, well, there's guys like Noam Chomsky or other very respectable writers who are able to come with almost scientific evidence of instances where things are seriously bad, and intended to be so. There's also cases like wasn't it the Martin Luther King assassination, where the judges ended up ruling that it was actually a state conspiracy, which was responsible for assassination. Or well,
We
there's
all know that the CIA killed Martin Luther King, though. We all know Fred Hampton, CIA, or Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X were all killed by the CIA. That's a pretty obvious one. I think there are certain conspiracy theories that are like pretty well grounded in
Yeah,
reality
for
that
sure.
kind of most people believe. Like the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing. It's like I think we all kind of know that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. But
Yeah,
then,
Jeffrey
there are
Epstein.
different
Let's go on
layers
the
to
record
that.
with that. Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. I'll say that. I'll say the word.
But then there are other layers below that. I don't know if you can pull this up, Dreams. There's like a whole like conspiracy pyramid to where there's like the ones that are grounded in reality, and then there's the ones that
Oh
like
yeah, I've
fall
seen
under.
those
Do you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
who made that graph?
I don't know.
That one made
No,
me angry.
Is that like the
I think there
iceberg?
was a good one
Or-
though. There was a good one because there were some. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about that like went viral on Twitter, and it had some of the more verifiable things like down on the like crazy person level. But yeah,
yeah,
it
the
was
If I
one.
that one,
search,
the
but
upside
if I
down.
try to search,
That one.
yeah, I was gonna say if I search conspiracy pyramid, I'm just gonna get the unseen eye all day long.
Yeah, that thing. That's
Look up who the artist is. What's their motivation?
That's my thing. I didn't like this one. It made me angry because what they think is grounded in reality are only conspiracies that benefit liberals. So
that's true.
I mean,
That is true.
it's there was a bit of a bias on this one. Like all
Oh
of the
shit.
ones that I believe in are up here.
QAnon. What's your thoughts on QAnon? I
Oh
gotta ask.
God.
My
My
QAnon
thoughts?
is an anomaly.
You want to hear my thoughts on it?
Hell yeah.
I think, again, where it comes from is very difficult to say. But what bothers me about it is that there are a whole lot of subjects, that are now being pushed under the QAnon umbrella, which just by themselves deserve, some kind of investigation. But I should say, why I moved away from the conspiracy stuff is because, you can try to fit the whole world and all of its problems into your world, but how does that help you change things directly for yourself and those around you, your local community? It might even be a distraction from making meaningful change if most of what you do is trying to figure out ways in which you've been screwed over or cheated and so on, right?
I think that the whole QAnon thing, because it was originally just literally a trip code posting on 4chan, right? Like that
Right,
was how it all got started, and then I think the whole
yeah,
like a broken clock is right twice a day type of thing was in effect with QAnon, where there were some things that were pretty verifiable that
yeah,
they
that's the thing,
released
right?
out, but then other
That was
things
the
were just
issue.
yeah.
It's
Is that
mimicking.
you have pictures of a document that the president of the United States has signed before it's been released to the public, being posted on this thing on the internet, and he's got a book and a pen over it that shows 2-3 letters that can be verified later when the document was released. So it's like whoever this is has access to the White House and whoever Donald Trump, like, you know what I mean? It's somebody that's really close. It had to be, because they were actually posting verifiable things that was the most baffling thing about QAnon. But
You know what it probably
I
is?
never trusted it. I could never trust it, because it's like,
It's
this is an
probably
anomaly.
someone who worked at the White House, and then they're just shit posting. They're like, I could
Yeah.
incite so much stuff by.
If it is real, I think it got compromised anyway.
Yeah,
Trust
I
the
do
plan,
believe
bros.
that.
Trust the plan.
Yeah.
They're trying
2
to
more
start a
weeks.
movement.
Now, I'm saying this as somebody, you know, with a Jewish background. You know, I've got some Jewish roots, and when I hear that things like, you know, investigating how, you know, the finance system is good for some and not good for others, which is, you know, that's a perfectly uh, fine subject to investigate. This somehow gets pushed under the QAnon umbrella now, and all called anti-Semitic. You know, so it seems like if there's any agenda to it, let's speculate a bit here. It could be to discredit, you know, earnest investigation into very pressing subjects. You know, because at this point, anybody who would talk about, you know, scrutinizing the international banking system, you know, for good reason, they could be heaped in with, you know, anti-Semites, and that includes me at this point. You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. So it seems like what really bothers me is that, you know, the discussion about meaningful problems that need a meaningful solution, it gets silenced because it's being put under this umbrella or associated with this something that's completely totally out of whack. You know, and well, there's all sorts of weird um, abuses and things being perpetrated by, well, all sorts of people, and these are things, you know, we all want to live happy lives, but you know, sometimes with or usually, at least in what I've seen, what little I've seen of this QAnon stuff, it seems to do away with any kind of nuance. You know, it's all this master plan, or it's
Well, yeah,
all
it's
this.
no longer about QAnon. It's about anything
There-
that goes against the agenda, which falls under that. And that's the thing, is you have these like genuine QAnon conspiracies that are like hurting people and it's causing discourse, but then you have things that are like verifiable that they're shoving under
Yeah.
this umbrella, so that way they just
Yeah, dude.
shut out all of it.
So, like
was-
right now, asking questions about the whole Epstein thing, you know, which was a thing before QAnon. This is now a QAnon thing, I believe. You know, I'm going a bit. I'm not too sure about most of these subjects, but that's what I think is the case now, right? So you talk about these weird people and their weird scandals, but it's been going on forever, and suddenly this QAnon thing comes along, and well, this graph we were looking at just now, it calls things a anti-Semitic point of no return, when obviously there's a whole lot of political polarization and extremism growing among young people today, which is very concerning, right? But even still, not everything is communist or Nazi or anti-Semitic or something like that. And, you know, bombing these discussions with super heavy terms like that, I think it takes away nuance and the ability to come to a meaningful conclusion rather than contribute to finding meaningful conclusion.
There was a guy with a check mark on Twitter who made a comment.
It always starts with that. It always starts.
Who made a comment about how the people that believe in the Federal Reserve conspiracy theory are all alt-right. And then YouTube immediately took down all the videos regarding to ban any video explaining how the Federal Reserve actually works with its bonds and wanting like tax on top of all the money that's been created to create debt. Yeah, like you can't find those videos anymore on YouTube because one guy with a Twitter account that was high up said one thing and called it alt-right. And in my opinion, this whole Donald Trump thing damaged the whole conspiracy community so bad because it allowed the mainstream media to just blanket everything as an alt-right or, you know, under one, because everyone who was on one side was just a Nazi. And if you believe this, X, you're Nazi. So just even believing a conspiracy theory
it made
labeled
it far
you
worse
into a vile person.
You had these like with that where YouTube is taking down videos, and that's the thing. I think you should either have all of them or none of them. Like
Right.
allow people to do their own research, and people are stupid. They'll fall for anything. And if that information is accessible, yes, they're going to go down these rabbit holes, whatever. But they would have done that anyways. Like that it's the mentality portion of that. Like with the whole you and I were looking at the Las Vegas shooting, like those types of things. You cannot find any videos that aren't by a mainstream news source. If it isn't by like CNN or ABC, whatever, they just deleted it. They straight up deleted like any of the people who recorded themselves and uploaded it. Like they were there and were like recording firsthand what was happening. They deleted those videos, and the only way that you can find them is when they're like bunched together with other clips that they put into their compilation or their timelines, whatever, for when it happened. And I'm not saying that like there's some bigger conspiracy there, but they're perpetuating it by deleting it. And that's how people go down these rabbit holes, is they're like, oh, they're deleting it for a reason. And you may have good intentions whenever you take those things down, but you're just hurting the effort to minimize it by flaming the fire. Or by
it's also worth asking, why is the solution to this problem of people being influenced by misinformation? Why is the solution to this removing information? Why isn't it funding the public school system in the United States, for example, in a way, or changing the curriculum where people are educated to be critical thinkers more than they are now, for example. There can be so many solutions, and I also don't really believe in information control in that sense, because again, humans. Sorry.
Who benefits from censorship in the end?
Yeah, right. And when there's
corporations,
when there's information currents going, it could be corporations, it could be individuals, it could be lobbyists, it could be governments. God knows, but the more you take away from like this chaotic mass, which is like the public domain or publicly accessible information, the more risk there is of like a negative kind of control, especially, with technology. It's become so easy. You could literally just push a button if you wanted to, and take websites out, or erase a whole a YouTube channel. Wasn't there this thing where videos about World War II, historical educational videos, were being flagged by YouTube as hateful and therefore removed? So retelling of history was slowly being confined on YouTube. Something like that happened quite recently, I think. It was all algorithm based, but you can already smell that if this can go accidentally, then what happens when people sit behind the steering wheel of these great systems, and are influenced by their ideology, whatever that may be.
Dreams, pull up that Bernie Sanders said something about Trump and like being banned off of Twitter, and it just shows how like this isn't like a partisan issue. It's just straight up these corporations wanting to control the narrative no matter what. Like Bernie Sanders said that it's very alarming because it may be Trump now, but then it may be someone on the far other side later, and so you just have these
there's this saying too, right? It's a quote. I don't know who it's by or what it's from, but it's like you see it a lot posted. Critical communities, or generally, first they came for those guys, and I said nothing, and all was good. And then they came for those guys.
Yeah. I remember that.
That
was
oh
my God.
Me, and there was nobody to defend me, or defend my rights or speak up about my rights, because everybody was already gone.
Yeah,
I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
It's funny that you talk about that, because that was up in my history class in like high school. That's what was on the wall, was a poster with that quote about the Holocaust. I don't remember who it's by, but it was regarding the Holocaust, I think. Right. But yeah, what did Bernie Sanders say?
No, he's just saying he doesn't feel comfortable about Twitter's permanent ban against despite him being a pathological liar. See,
this is CNN, right?
They put this spin because he said that in the past about Trump, right? So they had to put that. Oh, despite you've said that he's a pathological liar, so they put it as in if that's what he said in the full sentence, full stop. And for 100%, he did not just say that. Like,
Yeah, I
he
can
just probably said
guarantee he did not say,
they
like,
worked.
he may be a horrible human being, but
This is the
this
most
and this.
watered down version of what he said. It's like doesn't feel comfortable.
That's ridiculous.
No, he's like there's
We're
probably
looking
a
at
lot
CNN
more.
politics here, right? So I mean that should say enough.
But that's the thing. That's the first thing that pops up on everyone's feed. That's the problem. That's what I get. That's the
Quite
first thing I get.
interesting.
Use
As a
DuckDuckGo.
European,
See if that changes it.
as a European, it's quite interesting to see that sure enough, European culture is also influenced by U.S. culture, but the polarization and well, excuse my French, but the shit slinging at each other, it seems so much more intense in the States than it does here. I wonder why that is. Is it a two-party system? Is it something else? I'm not particularly politically partial. I feel politically homeless, generally speaking.
I stopped
but it's
using
really easy to tell.
Because it didn't really change much.
Yeah. I think that DuckDuckGo is a bit different for me. Like, I've definitely seen some different results, but I think there's other browsers that very, very specifically seek out like ones that aren't by major news systems. I know that what's that Russian one called?
Reuters?
No.
Is that it?
God, it's the one that they you remember there was the whole Dreams, you remember this? There was the whole like Tom Hanks pedophile conspiracy, and they were like, look, if you look up this thing, with this string of numbers on this browser, then it does this. But they proved that if you just type in any string of numbers on there, it would come up with images of children. Like that's how like screwed this browser was. And it was a Russian browser.
Yandex.
Yandex. That's what it was.
Yo, but remember that video I sent you? That video I sent you about that guy?
Yeah, that guy got taken down.
Dive? Yeah, all of his videos are gone. He's on what's it called, BitChute now. But the problem is BitChute is now labeled as a alt-right echo chamber because a bunch of actual racist people who think Hitler really wasn't that bad of a guy make videos and post them there all day long.
That's the
and
thing.
Every time I go there, they're on the front page.
You can't.
But if I was trying to paint my enemy, I would make those videos and then post them there, or find all those videos and then just dump them all there with dummy accounts to make any kind of alternative YouTube just become an echo chamber of hatred.
Yeah. I mean, you cannot tell me that like half of those videos, or even stuff on like Twitter, is not just from bots, just trying to incite violence and make things awful. So much
we have to consider when we read things.
Good point, actually. Whether videos. It's feeling locked in through Corona or things like these, mystical practices, meditation, philosophy, they can really help with building up a kind of resilience against the incitement of hate that you just mentioned.
Okay, how do I start meditating? I need to start meditating.
Just sit there, dude.
Yeah, is that the whole thing about it? Because I feel like there's more to it.
Chill, bro.
It's a misconception for sure. People say just chill or just ride a bike. I don't think it's the same. Daydreaming is not the same as meditation. But there's a book in the VRM library highlighted as the top one pick of the entire thing. It's the Mind Illuminated by John Yates, and explains the mindfulness of breathing technique, which is like the most essential and most practiced, I believe, too. Meditation technique. We will have lessons about this, actual lessons. Somebody's going to teach you how to do it at VR Mystery School too. But other than sitting down, you got to breathe through your nose preferably, and just focus on the breath. Things will come along that will distract you from that. Thoughts, scents, sound, whatever. And you go back through this focus on the nostrils and the breathing through the nostrils. The sensation of breath moving in through the nose and out through the nose. And just this thing, repeating this action, which actually is one of the most boring things somebody can do. It brings up so many distractions and things that will excite your mind, and then you try to come back from that and go back to the breath. So well, it has a
I
lot of
was
effects.
I was always under the notion that when you do meditation, your whole goal is to try and silence thought entirely.
Yeah, well, again, meditation is something like sports.
Like it's very difficult to stop
While we're on
yourself
the
from
whole like
thinking.
meditation thing, do you believe in like all the prana and like the whole aura field around our body and all that?
That's another tough one. I've never seen any evidence of or photographs of auras, for example. They're tricks, they're provable to be simple tricks, at least in most cases, I believe. But when I practice Tai Chi, stuff is happening. I can feel it in my body for sure. When I do other stuff from other traditions, the thing that I do mainly. I can absolutely feel, being invigorated, or almost it's like taking ecstasy maybe at times. So is that chi? Is that something else?
Have you experienced like that bliss in meditation, where
Yeah,
you just
for sure.
like get that overwhelming sense of joy?
Yeah, yeah, but it's only again one stage or particular effect. And the funny thing about this mindfulness of breathing is that the whole practice remains the same through the entire thing, but you can go through so many different experiences using that practice. There's like one thing you could Google are the jhanas. They are like mapped out areas. I guess we can call them areas, right? But they're really like experiences or states of being that you can sort of navigate through while meditating. But sometimes this doesn't come about. Other times it does. Oh, I see you're waiting there. JHANAS. Oh, N, not M.
Oh,
It's in
and sorry.
Nico. Yeah, it's not really something you can look at. It's more like teachings. Oh, maybe that's the pyramid. Try that one.
Have you what are we looking at here?
So these are like stages of meditate. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a good picture. Anyway, you sit down, you meditate, and you can be overcome by certain experiences. Whether it's bliss, whether it's something like feeling you're in a limitless space, or there's a bunch of other sensations and so on. These things can just overcome you, and they might be markers or signals that you're at a certain stage in your practice. But yeah, it's not
Now,
necessarily guaranteed. But I did want to make the comment, meditation is like sports. Nobody does sport. Hey, do you do sports? Well, what kind of sports, right? Are you doing football? Are you cycling? Are you doing mindfulness meditation? Are you doing guided meditations? Are you focusing on something specific? There's all these different kinds. And some are more good for one thing than they are for another, and vice versa. So, yeah, so much to say about it too.
now, just to clarify, when you meditate, you are not on drugs, and all the feelings you experience are totally from you and not an outside source, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Which is completely baffling by itself. Even things like angelic invocation or these crazy experiences that happen in ceremonial magic, they're all coming from you in a sense, or they're happening inside you without any intervention from substances.
I've always thought that drugs are a way of cheating your way to meditation state.
Fast food is how I look at
The
it.
fast food. That's a good way of putting that.
Fast food
Somebody
spirituality is what
mentioned,
drugs are,
right?
basically.
Yeah, it could be, but also somebody mentioned, let's say there's some kind of a very high state of trance or whatever you want to call it, to the point where all these things happen. If you throw yourself in there without the preparation, it might be unearned wisdom. These aren't my words, but this is something that you see mentioned a lot.
Yeah, unearned
Like,
wisdom.
you might be able to be there, but are you able to comprehend it?
Every time I'm with somebody who's never taken a psychedelic before and they want to take one, I always say, beware of unearned wisdom. Do not go chasing rabbits in your head when you come up with a crazy idea of thing, the way things are and the way reality is, because that's where people go a little offside. Just stay with us, have fun, just look at the lights, but don't go chasing waterfalls in your head.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just
it's a very good point, right? Because you got to go up there, you got to experience it, but then you got to go back down to earth and make sense of what you just experienced in daily life. You got to fit it into the rest somehow. And sure, there might have been some amazing insights. Your mind have been blown into multiple pieces, and but you got to put it back together, right? And make sense of stuff again. So whether that's drugs, mysticism, magic, it's all really the same thing. We already talked about this earlier, right?
I don't
It has
think
to
I wanted to ask
contribute.
you, have you done psychoactive drugs before?
Yeah, not too heavy psychedelics. I don't feel ready for those, but I've experimented.
If you were offered like with a shaman to do like DMT or ayahuasca, would you do it?
Totally, yeah. I plan to eventually, but I think I got a bunch of cleaning out the closet to do before I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard that like
don't take it
with
very lightly.
I don't know if this is true, Dream. She'll have to correct me because I'm not an expert on psychoactive drugs, but I've heard that like LSD and mushrooms are kind of like the fun experiences, but when you go to like DMT and ayahuasca, those are just like those are for your awakenings, like your spiritual awakenings
yeah.
that you
Those
need
aren't
to have.
toys.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca, DMT, those are not toys. Those are not drugs. Those are something entirely.
Yeah, I think mushrooms fit that category too, don't they? What do you think, Dreams?
Yeah, it depends on how many mushrooms you take. Because if you take a lot of magic mushrooms, you can get to DMT levels,
Right.
where you can go on completely mystical experiences. If you take too much LSD, you will just get really high for a really long time and just be like pretty much on the ground staring at the sky, just making noises for like 2 days. Where if you take a lot of mushrooms, you're going to another dimension. You're gonna pet some animals that you can't even describe to anyone.
That's
You're
great.
gonna meet some aliens, and they're gonna tell you about a door in their house. And if you go in the door, it's the Acacia Records, and you're gonna hear voices of all different pitches going up and down.
I had a
They're gonna tell
friend
you you're not
who
ready.
was on mushrooms and he walked outside and the second he saw flowers he just like broke down crying. It's like this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Like it was a
The first time I took mushrooms, I was walking around my friend's house and I looked outside and the sun was going down at the top of a little hill outside of his house, and there was a playground, and it looked so magnificently beautiful, and I had to run outside and enjoy it. And as I ran outside, I stepped in the water in the ditch, and the water like shocked me and made me like cold, and then I realized I was in a neighborhood that was full of police.
oh
The
geez.
entire neighborhood was police.
I
And
remember
I'm
you
like,
telling
gonna
me
just
this
go running
story.
around in their neighborhood. I'm gonna go run in their neighborhood on mushrooms by myself. And no thanks. I just went back inside, just like watched the TV breathe for 4 hours.
Maybe an interesting thing to mention. A friend of mine who does these things regularly, he's not so much into magic or occult stuff, or, well, he's pretty seriously into self-development and all that. But
So the
his,
spiritual aspect.
yeah, so what he does is he gets his, to quote Terence McKenna, the heroic dose. He takes it, but he doesn't go outside or watch TV or funny stuff. He just lays down in a dark room, for the duration of the experience. And
That's
he's
heavy.
also going into it, expecting or hoping to learn something. So this is really interesting. I don't want to get too much into personal details, but a recent account he gave me of one of these experiences was where he was able to see certain family relationships from multiple perspectives, and how even the silly, petty things were somehow meaningful. Yada yada. Long story short, very mystical experience, actually transformative. And he said that it brought him closer to his father, even though his father might not realize this. So how cool is that? That you can use these things in certain ways too. It doesn't always have to be entertainment, and this,
That's
in my understanding, applies to mushrooms as well.
That's Terence McKenna that your friend's doing. He had a called the heroic dose, where you
Yeah.
take 5 grams of dried mushrooms and sit in complete darkness. And yeah, that's a really heavy way,
Yeah,
because
it's like
when
soul.
you're not with
I
people,
don't even know what the word is.
when you're not with people and the lights are off, it's like you have nothing but you and your own mind.
Is it like a
now.
deprivation tank, but with
Yeah,
mushrooms?
it's
Pretty much.
well,
yeah.
like Terrence McKenna describes it as being like 5 feet from a nuclear explosion, while you were protected in plexiglass.
Right.
Oh my god. Do you have any like weird experiences on psychoactive drugs? Any weird stories? Because I know Amsterdam is like, if you think of drugs, you think of Amsterdam. So
Dude, didn't they banned mushrooms recently though, didn't they?
did they?
Yeah. But, you know,
In
you can still get
Amsterdam.
them under the counter, most shops, even tourists. So don't
Okay.
let it repel you. But there's a reason for that, you know,
And
because
there's truffles too now.
yeah, but a lot of tourists, especially, you know, they think, oh, well, let's go to the most busy square in Amsterdam and use this weird stuff that I never heard about because it's funny, right? Everybody says it's funny, and they ended up seriously hurting themselves or causing problems. So yeah, this kind of changed. But if you're really looking for it, you can find anything here. But yeah, it's funny actually. I haven't ventured into that kind of stuff that much. My most crazy experiences were of stimulants or drugs, just using mysticism or not necessarily using it, being overcome by it. And I actually wanted to ask you, Deceased, do you think you may have ever had an unintended mystical experience? You know, something that maybe you couldn't put to words that transformed you for the better. And it was like, wow. I don't know, anything?
That's a hard one. I don't know, because I've definitely had experiences in the past that have been kind of unexplainable, but then I dock it up to like, oh, it's a sleep paralysis demon or something of that sort. I've never like witnessed anything to where I just straight up couldn't explain it, but I'm kind of a skeptic in my own mind where I tend to tune that stuff out. So anytime I would see it, it wouldn't get to me because, you know, I choose not to be attentive with it. I think that's kind of the bridge between, especially like with meditation, how I'm not being attentive with it and I'm not allowing myself to sit with it. So I think if I kind of open myself more and just let it happen, I would see those things much more often. But for the most part, no. I don't really have any mystical experiences that I can think of off the top of my head. I've tried astral projection. It's hard. And I can't. Have you tried to astral project?
Oh yeah, and with moderate success. I'm still really working on, I guess, what you could call the basics. You know, so that means training the mind's eye too. And you know, just it may be a little weird because you know I'm running this project and all that stuff, but by no means am I an expert or what you could call an adept. You know, I'm still figuring a lot of stuff out. But you know, something I wanted to add to that question. Have you ever maybe like not eaten any great food for a long time? You know, I don't know, maybe because you didn't have money for it, or just generally didn't get around to it, and then you get this meal, and it's like you could almost cry, you know, at how good it is. Have you ever experienced something like that, or
Well,
maybe?
I've experienced the opposite of that to where I was like vegan for a period of time because I just kind of wanted to see how my body would react to that type of stuff. And then, you know, I was vegan for like, I don't know, what was it, like 7 or 8 months. And then I started eating like, you know, dairy again. And it was like shocking to my body because my body had adapted to not have it. So I
Right.
think that like depending on your situation, your body will just adapt to whatever it consumes and whatever the surroundings are. And that goes for just about anything, all the way from food, all the way to, you know, the way that you breathe. Like you've seen those the Sherpas who take people up on onto Mount Everest. Their lung capacity and ability to process oxygen is just so insanely beyond what people
Yeah,
down
totally.
here can do. Have you
Yeah.
Dreams? I don't know. I couldn't find this video even when I searched for it. But there's a video they had like a bunch of normal people go into this like chamber where they would just slowly take out the oxygen, and then they had like a Sherpa in there, and it got to like a point where everyone just collectively like passed out, and the Sherpa was just sitting there like smiling and laughing, and they kept turning it down to where it was like fatal levels. They had to take everyone out, give them masks and everything. It was a whole ordeal. Like there was someone who was about to have a stroke, and this guy's just sitting in there, and like his body is so in tune with nature.
Sherpa?
I think so.
Yeah, that's also a good point. We haven't really talked about, getting in tune with nature as much yet, because that's also a very mystical thing, right? Especially these days when we have come to a point where, even most balanced people have all these methods and things to run their daily lives, which are not natural to us. That doesn't mean they're bad, but with so much artificial systems going on, whether they're good or bad, doesn't matter. The tendency to go back and reconnect with the most essential rhythms or phenomena and so on, it gets sometimes pushed a little more into the background, right? So just to give a very clear example of this, one of the things I had great issue with was the fact that things change, right? So good moments come, but when will they come, right? I want them now. Or, okay, they're here now. I want them to be forever. When you build a personality on this, you're going to see that you're going to have a lot of trouble through life, because, what you want and what you demand from life and the universe is just in straight up conflict with the way it works at an essential level. So while you're trying to create permanence around you, the universe will constantly remind you that that's not how it works, right?
I think that's why nostalgia became such a big thing in the past, like 10 to 20 years. Like before, if you go to all the way to like ancient times, there was no sense of nostalgia. It may have been like, man, I miss when my kid was here, my kid died, but that's about as far as that went. We didn't like long for an entire generation, an entire period of time where things were fundamentally different, because back then, 10 years from then was no different than the last 10 years. You may have like learned how to build something new, but it wasn't really fundamentally different up until like the Industrial Revolution, where things just started changing on a daily basis. Like everything got better, and that's even now. Like 2015 is so much different from 2020 and 2021, and 2015 is so much different from 2010. So you have like it's becoming even smaller increments, where like the 1985 may have not been much different from 1984, but then like 2021 is so much different from 2020. So you're shrinking down the time period to where people feel like so much more time is passing than is really passing, if that makes sense. So you have these the perception of time is shrinking, so we're moving much more rapidly.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if you look at just how much information is floating around, even like 10, 20 years ago, I would have to come to your house to talk about half of the stuff we're talking about here, maybe, right? And then there came like internet, and then, there was a phone, of course, and the cell phone, and so on. Yeah, it's really, really funny stuff.
My great-grandmother was born, I think, it was a year 1913. I think it was a year after the Titanic sank. Like, and there was no sliced bread, like no commercially available sliced bread then, and she lived all the way to VR headsets. She was 101 when she died.
Jesus
like, that's
Christ.
insane to me. Like, you can live in a time when cars weren't even like really a thing, like they weren't a popular thing, all the way to people, essentially doing this, like communicating across vast distances in virtual space. That's insane to me. So I'm really excited to see what VR has in the next 5 years, even, because like the way that people perceive things as change is like we all thought we'd have flying cars, but there's no reason to. Flying cars, I mean, do you want some crazy person who cut you off in traffic earlier driving what is essentially a fucking airplane over the over the freeway? No, you probably don't. So we don't have any need for those things. So we're going to, like, you can't really predict what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. There's so much fundamental change that we're going to look back and be like, wow, how did we ever live like that, without this thing? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this all develops later on.
For sure.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So, what about aliens from a magician's point of view?
Ah, the aliens. Bring up the video, Dreams. Bring up the fucking Pentagon video. Get that. I need to see that again.
What
I wanna
Pentagon
see it.
video?
The
What-
Pentagon video, the UFO Pentagon
Tic Tac?
video.
Guys, while you pull that up, I'm going to have a quick bio break again. I'll just be...
Yeah, you do that. Yeah, pull up the...
Oh, the one they released?
Yeah,
You're
the one
talking
they
about.
officially
Okay.
released.
Oh, the one that was like 2015. It was already out on the internet. That we
Yeah,
all were like,
and
"Look
then
at
they
these
just
aliens,"
verified
and
it,
they're
yeah.
like, "Nah, it's not aliens." And now they're like, "Yeah, it's aliens."
Well, they didn't say it's alien. It's just an unidentified flying... Okay,
But
let's
here's
see.
the thing: who owns this footage? Guardian News. Fuck.
I don't know. The U.S. government owns this fucking footage.
Yeah.
This was released into the public domain. I don't give a shit.
It's their logo.
Yeah, so what? They can't license this footage.
See, here's the thing.
I don't... Like, there's no...
Here's the thing: if a superpower it will withhold information from its public, why would they ever tell them the complete truth on something this grandiose?
Because the truth is inevitable.
it is true.
I love how in, like, alien movies, how they're always, like, very serious about this stuff, and then this guy's like, whoa, got it! Like,
Dude, you gotta remember, these are like 20-year-old.
yeah. They're like, what the fuck is that thing? Jesus, man.
Did they shoot it down in the video?
No, that thing
No.
flied away, it flew away.
Oh.
They have no clue where
Thought
that
he
thing
said-
went.
I thought he said he got it, and they were all laughing. I
No,
was
no,
like,
no,
what
no.
if that
He
was
got
like-
it. He got it on the tracker. Like, he was able to track it. That was the whole thing. Was he was using the program within the jet in order to track where the thing is. So he was, like, actively pushing down the box smaller and smaller in order to track it. But
I think I missed it. Can we see it again? I see it on the screen there.
yeah.
Oh, this is from The Guardian too? That's interesting.
Well, this is just footage that was released by the Pentagon. Like, this footage was declassified recently, but it was actually
Is that part
released
of
in, like,
the-
2015.
Was that part of the huge dump, like the 200,000 documents or UFO files that came out recently, something like that?
Was it?
I'm not sure.
Dreams,
I
was
know.
it? Do you remember that? I remember hearing about that, but I didn't...
I don't know if this was one of those documents. See, here's the thing: they release all those documents all the time, but then the news never covers them
Right.
because they're all on pieces of paper and nobody reads. Everyone wants videos. Everyone
Yeah.
has the attention span of a goldfish, so they don't read and they don't know anything, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So when everyone freaks out about UFOs, it's always when they release videos.
Yeah.
But there's been declassified evidence of UFOs for a long time. And, like,
Yeah.
the Canadian government released a bunch of, like, documents and shit, but nobody gave a crap.
Yeah, I don't know who it was that said this, right? But if there is like only 1% of all the quote unquote UFO evidence which has some truth to it, then it still amounts for more than anybody is comfortable with admitting, right? So there's again, I haven't driven into it enough to say anything meaningful on the subject, but it's poking us in the eye, and we have no choice but to come to terms with the fact that there are instances that are worthy of serious investigation.
My thing is though is like here's our camera development over years. You know, we have like just insane like 8K cameras now, and then the quality of UFO footage has stayed like this for the entire period of that time. And I think that's that. If everybody has a cell phone, everyone, and everyone's recording all the time, there are like how many million images are uploaded to Instagram every second? It's like a billion images or something crazy like that. But if that's all possible, then like why haven't we seen like a sudden increase in UFO sightings? Like and especially with the quality of it, like the quality of the pictures.
I mean, you only know what you come across, right? Like, I don't know, they don't exactly become world news. It's not like CNN's putting out fucking UFOs to feed all to the normies, you know.
I don't trust any video evidence or pictures of anything. I trust what I've seen in my life, and I've seen like one event that really made me something really weird. Me and my friend were driving home down the back roads out by my house, and we heard like it sounded like some kind of broken engine, like a lawnmower engine, just going jung 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 jung, like it was like an engine that didn't have a hood or something, on a truck. And we like got out and stopped the truck to like hear it, and there was like these weird clouds that were like shaped like giant discs, and like they were all like weird cloud formations. And then an airplane came out of the clouds, and it was like a really, really small single man plane, and it looked really strange, and it was like going really slow, and it was making that strange jung 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 jung, and it was getting louder, and it flew overhead of us, flew back into the clouds, and then just went immediately silent. And me and my friend like looked at each other and we're like, what? Just got in the car, drove home, and my mom came out of the house and she's like, did you guys hear that weird noise? It sounded like some broken engine in the sky. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, okay, so we didn't hallucinate that. Like, it was weird.
I had this weird encounter when I was driving up to Montana, and I was just out in, you know, Montana's very like open, empty. There are mountains, but it takes a while to get to them. Anyways, I think we're coming up through Wyoming, and all of a sudden, you know, it's super flat, like no mountains or anything. And I see this like glider, and it's about like 3 miles that way up in the sky, and the glider is like wider than a plane. It's way bigger. Like the wings are like if 2 planes were stacked together. And you know, I told my dad, I'm like, look, there's like a plane, and you know, he acknowledged it. And then all of a sudden, I get out my binoculars to like look at it closer, because we had binoculars since we were looking for, you know, moose and bears, whatever. It was Yellowstone, and I look at it, and then it just Control-Z's out of existence, just clips, like it's gone. Like I'm looking straight at it, and it just disappears instantaneously, and I'm like, what? And I tell my dad, I'm like, did you see that? And he was like, yeah, it like went into the clouds. I'm like, there's no clouds there. It just clipped. It's gone. And so I don't know. I just saw this glider that I will never see again. Was it a plane? Most likely. And did it just, you know, is there some kind of weird scientific explanation for why it just clipped out of existence? I'm sure.
Dude,
but
you
saw something
black sites at all?
Dude,
do what now?
You've just seen something that I've seen. Okay, there's many videos. Sorry, go ahead.
You live near any U.S. military black sites or military bases in general?
That's a good point. There may have been a U.S. military. This wasn't in my home state. I was driving up there. So there may have been a military base close by. I should actually look that up. But, yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Back when I was deep in my conspiracy rabbit hole, when YouTube had tons of like crazy videos all over the place that you could just find readily available, there was so many videos of airplanes that just had like one wing that would just disappear and clip in and out for like reason. And people were just like filming airplanes that just like looked odd and would just like disappear and then come back, like they just went behind an invisible shield in the sky.
Yeah. It's weird.
There's some weird stuff. Like Like we're just ants on an ant farm, man. This is something going on.
So
There's something going on out there.
the whole reason I even brought up aliens was because you've studied a little bit of Kabbalah, right?
Oh yeah.
So in Kabbalah, I found out about like, you know, the light body and like the Merkaba meditation, where you kind of like activate, you know, your light body DNA or whatever people are calling it. And like I noticed, okay, that looks a lot fucking UFO. Like the whole where you make your aura field kind of turn into a huge saucer, and then you supposedly ascend into godhood or some shit. Like that's pretty similar.
Yeah, I think
Two-stroke.
like this word Merkaba is being used a lot by New Age community. The actual Merkaba tradition,
Spirit science.
sadly, you know, it was an oral tradition that probably didn't survive, at least not completely. But it's exceedingly weird, yeah. And the shape of the, you know, the chariot, which we're all supposed to possess in some way, is very, very strange. You know, it's the 3D inverted triangles with each other kind of thing, or yeah, I can't vouch necessarily for like modern reinterpretations of this system, because in most cases I've seen they are a new thing. You know, that's not really relating to Heckalot texts or.
What
So,
about like, you know, Ezekiel's wheel and like the other crazy light things ancient cultures have seen in the sky?
yeah, were they seeing them in the sky, or was that the result of a sage's, you know, quote unquote astral travel, or
Yeah.
vision? Who's to say? Where they invented as devices to, you know, continue retelling of certain wisdoms. You know, that could also be. Those texts are particularly interesting. I think, you know, traditionally you mentioned Kabbalah. They have 4 ways of interpreting text. The surface value, and then certain levels of esoteric understanding, or like the, you know, reading between the lines. So there's not just one thing to read in between the lines, but a whole bunch of them. You know, I think in many cases these texts are covering 2 or maybe more of those levels, you know, of interpretation.
Have you done any of like the Merkaba guided meditations or anything?
I'll be back in a sec. Keep talking.
Sure. I've done plenty, you know, Western esoteric stuff, but nothing really relating specifically to the Merkaba stuff, because as I understand it, it's so incomplete or hard to figure out that it just deserves more dedication than, oh, I'm going to try this once.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
The idea that you, I believe traditionally at least, you know, you can have these crazy, lively visions, you know, full sensory experiences, visual, sense, feelings, and even senses you don't know how to describe because you don't necessarily have them physically, right? Just, and then you travel in this vehicle of light into the throne room of God. How crazy is that, right?
Now, you said you've astral projected, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you have when you're in like the astral, like how many times have you been there?
Oh, probably neglectably amount of times. You know, it's for me mostly practice still, rather than being very comfortable in that. So there's people with tons more experience with this stuff than I am.
So like, so maybe just like maybe you can count on your hand how many times you've been there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
It
So
actually worked.
now, have you done any like the Monroe things, like the gateway tapes and all that?
No, I was actually looking into them because I wanted to try them, but I haven't been able to penetrate the material, you know, and find the truly good sources or version books or whatever. So, but that's actually on my short list to do quite soon.
I can just give you the
Sweet.
like
There's
Google
like
Drive
one
link.
book, oh yeah, Google Drive, great. All
Well,
down
it's
the whole archive.
yeah, it's dude, it's great. I'm on like the 4th one, and you learn how to like, you know, make like an energy tool, basically like the wand of like Hermes had, basically, except you know it's all metaphysical. You know, you take all
You,
your prana and turn it into the tool and whatnot.
Okay, what?
And like,
What did I come back to?
oh, we're talking about astral projection and the Monroe stuff.
Okay. The Monroe stuff. You'll have to
The
elaborate
gateway,
on
the
that.
CIA remote viewing, that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
And they also do the remote viewing, and then but the end goal is becoming an astral traveler, all that kind of stuff. So I was going to ask if you
Right.
ever used methods from that, like an
Oh,
energy bar tool or a magic wand, like you said you had, to like open up portals in your dreams and shit like that. And
yeah, I mean, there's so many things to do, right? But each of them has like a specific recipe, so to speak. So while there's overlap, I think the kind of astral traveling you're talking about is a very specific thing, And in my case, for example, I've used it in some path working related stuff, which you use like a tool, an archetype or a symbol to meditate upon, and then hopefully you bring about a mind's eye or astral experience of this particular archetype. But yeah, just generally, it seems like this Monroe stuff is really sort of bare bones, or it's stripping it down to the essentials and then making it again a mechanical manual, right? Which seems super good.
It's very Western. It tries to remove all the woo woo and tries to be just like, all right, this is a science. Keep your mind open. Have no expectations and listen.
Well, isn't that a great way to approach this stuff, right? Because apparently you don't need all the dogma and all that. It might add something for your personal greater arc development, but if you can just approach a subject like this without any of the baggage and make it work relatively simply, well, that seems to me like a prime resource or something very interesting.
Are crystals bullshit?
Oh, yeah.
Or is there any merit to that?
Well, again, if you're talking ceremonial magic or magic in general, even in other non-Western traditions, anything can have a correspondence to something holy or a deity or an angel or a benefactor or a malefactor even, So depending on what you're trying to do here, it might be very useful ritual device that you can use to zone into this particular symbol or archetype or whatever it is you're going for. Can you cure cancer by putting a stone next to your bed? Probably not. No, I don't think so.
You think it's more about the association?
Discover? Well, sure enough, they seem like pretty wacky and cool things, and since so much of reality and life is to do with rhythms, patterns, harmonies between stuff, who knows? We might find out something, but I haven't found any conclusive proof, like having a salt crystal around you makes everything better. But I still keep one around anyway.
Here's my kind of view on crystals. I mean, a lot of it is kind of new agey bullshit, but it kind of goes back to like the everything has a soul theory, I guess.
Right.
And and everything has kind of that energy field. Every soul does.
Two Stroke has crystals. Just prefacing this, he has a rock collection.
So do I.
Yeah. I gotta ask, what's your favorite rock that you got?
Malachite, the weird green one.
Oh, you're a malachite, dude?
What is that?
I'm scared of
Dreams. Pull that up. What is malachite?
It's just a green rock.
Yeah, it's like green, rocky, crystally, and it's got different layers going on, and there's variations of it.
That's a toxic one, right?
It could very well be.
Oh, so it's like turquoise, kind of.
I'm weird. I kind of sleep with a lapis lazuli wand in my hand most nights.
What?
Oh, that's good stuff, man.
Did you make it?
Yeah, it's dream stuff. What?
Did you make it?
No. It's just a solid stone, but it's like it's just a stick, basically.
Yeah. So the book we're reading, again, I mentioned it before, Prometheus Rising. The author pretty much tries to argue if you can hack your own mind or your own life in a way that gives you better results, then believe whatever you have to believe, or maybe that's not even the case. Maybe there's more to it. But if it works for you, and if you are working from a paradigm or set of beliefs or ideas where this kind of stuff has a meaning for you, it can become maybe placebo effect. Just assuming that there's nothing to it at all, which there very well could be more to it. But let's just say, for the sake of the argument, there isn't, right? So you could maybe condition yourself into these things having a beneficial effect, even if they don't objectively do, right? If there is an absolutely true, personal motivation or energy that you can access with something like this, which you can't or have more difficulty accessing without it. And why isn't it a viable tool, a useful tool for you to, self-develop, bring about moods? If you have an association with figure in work and you're not feeling it, a certain day, well, introduce the stone into your sphere of consciousness, and who knows what might happen. You might just feel a little extra motivated if that's the perspective you're working from.
I know
Sugar
they
pills
definitely
work
help
though.
me.
I mean, the thing about sugar pills is like it. I think the human mind is much more powerful than we think it is, because someone will take a sugar pill and then they think it starts working, and then their body is like, oh, we can get back to normal function now, and then
Dude.
it'll start doing some crazy shit in order to
Dude, I
fix your
swear,
illness.
if you gave me a little piece of paper and said it was LSD and I ate it, I'd probably have a trip.
Right?
Well,
funny.
DMT is naturally produced in the brain. I'm sure your brain would conjure up something. I mean, people have like false trips all the time, like with weed.
Well,
we convinced
when you
my
say
one-
false, what is false,
False from the substance itself. It'd be
'Cause, I mean, your
created in
body-
their mind.
Well, your body
We all-
creates THC and all that too, so...
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
The body creates THC. I think
Why do you have THC receptors?
No, they're what's it called? Dopamine receptors. THC, it just so happens to look like dopamine in the chemical structure, so it fits
What?
in your dopamine receptors.
Man, I've been
DMT
lied
is the
to.
one that is naturally produced in the body, and it's been
Well,
shown to
yeah.
be like the levels
But-
are higher in like near-death situations.
Dreams, look it up. THC produced in the body. I'm pretty sure it
Dreams-
is.
Pull that shit up. THC production in the body. Oh my god.
Fucking Sadhguru talks about it.
Who said guru?
Like, the fucking head of Hinduism right now for the Western world.
What?
Yeah, he's like the big Hindu guru guy. He's very
You know,
popular.
there are things
but
that
they're
are similar to cannabinoids.
My bad.
This-
Cannabinoids, not THC
Like if you
specifically.
eat dark chocolate, you're having a different type of cannabinoid come into your brain that is very similar to THC and dopamine, but it isn't either of those two things.
What does cannabinoid
if you-
actually mean?
If you eat
Like-
dark chocolate and then smoke weed, you get higher because it makes your dopamine receptors.
Is that true?
massage.
Oh.
I've always heard
Yeah.
that as a.
Yes.
Oh my god.
And mangoes and dark chocolate.
Holy shit.
Why do you think it is that, if you look at the Abramelin book, the Book of Abramelin, it contains one of the most famous magical rituals of Western esotericism. There's so much fasting in there because apparently, whatever you put in your body is going to influence your consciousness. If it's alcohol, sure, it's a little more obvious. But I think too much sugar is linked to, getting a little cookie in the head, literally, like above a certain amount of grams per day. There's so many ways, in which, there's more going on in consciousnness and the human itself than just, what we are aware of, and that's interesting, the awareness. There's so much going on we aren't aware of, and that includes body feedback from glands, in the form of hormones and other stuff. It's like foods that can influence you. I think there's cheese that have certain recognized psychoactive abilities.
Nah. Cheese.
Well, yeah, cheese gives people weird dreams, man. That's why they
Yeah,
say don't eat
cheese-
before bed. Gives you nightmares.
That's David Firth, the guy who made salad fingers, used to eat cheese before bed just to make cartoons in the morning.
Well, there you go.
Is that a fact? What the fuck?
That's what he said. There's a couple of cartoons.
Everything leaves some kind of an influence on the human body.
You are what you eat, right?
Yeah, and you are what you think, maybe too, in that sense, right? Super much stuff in these little gems, these little axioms. I am looking at the time, though, guys. It's getting close to 30 past 9 p.m. here.
Yeah,
Maybe.
this has been a 3-hour podcast now. Our podcasts just keep getting progressively longer. So,
Sweet.
Two-Stroke, I hope that was down the rabbit hole enough for you.
Hell yeah, dude. You gotta go off the rails sometime.
We can go even further next time, maybe, if there's a next time. I love
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I linked I will link the VR Mystery School in the description, and I've already asked you what your bucket list thing is, so I guess we'll just wrap it up for a second time, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks again for the invite. And I was actually super nervous beforehand, but it ended up just being so much fun. Very chill atmosphere. So I really want to thank you
That's
for
what we
that.
try to go for. Is less of like an interview where we're putting you on the spot. We just want to discuss and have fun.
Awesome.
Anyways,
Tell me about the Book of the Law. What do you think about the Book of the Law?
all right.
Real short answer. There's more to occultism than Crowley, even though
Yeah.
some funny, some good.
Go check out the VR Mystery School. It's free to go see the world, and you can get VR chat for free. There's no reason why you shouldn't. So go check it out. But yeah, we will see you guys all in the next one. Thanks so much again.
Thank you too, folks. It was great. Take care.